I'm setting up the YouTube account, so please be careful what you say.
Morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning, Suzanne.
We have a plethora of deputies AG.
So I'm only here for E2 parks, the KSHCP MOA. So
Okay.
if you want to put me back in the waiting room, you can. If you want to leave me up here, that's fine too.
All right. You can stay in. We'll probably put you on mute and no video
All right.
because
I can.
you're so your presence is so great that it might
Overpowering. Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
I'm also just here to observe. I'm trying to get the picture to go away when I turn off my camera right now. So my thing.
Or actually, Melissa, you could just, if you're just observing, you could just go to the YouTube channel.
Oh, I was hoping to go into executive session. That's why.
You can't if you're not involved in it. Sunshine law violations. So unless you're involved in the executive session or necessary for the executive session, you're not allowed to be in an executive session.
Oh.
I was
we'll
there.
talk about this not on YouTube because, yeah.
As Darlene mentioned earlier, we are already live on YouTube, so we shouldn't have too many discussions.
Okay. Well, that's a showstopper. All right, I'm going to mute and we're waiting for 4 more minutes and for 2 more board members. Darlene. Okay. Can everybody hear? Chris, can you hear?
I can hear Tommy.
Okay. Just want to make sure Chris is connected here.
Jimmy,
Right.
I like your
Chris
picture.
Ewan, can you hear?
Yes,
All right, then I think we are ready to start. Board members, everyone ready? Darlene,
Yep.
everyone? Okay. Great. Then we are starting this morning's, oh, I need just a couple of minutes for member Ewan.
While we're waiting, I'd like to raise Uka view of Ulupalakua. Normally you're looking down toward the sea.
Oh, hi, everybody. I'm having some trouble, and I might sign on again.
We
And
can
just
see and hear
Okay,
you.
we'll wait till you have a good connection.
Although we can see and hear you well now.
Yes, we
yes,
can.
okay. Well, we'll just go with it for like this for now, and then I might change the connection. If Darlene, if you're listening, I might try to connect on my other. I'm going to try to connect on my regular device again.
You look fine now and we can hear you
Yeah.
very well.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
There is an echo, Chris. So you probably have two devices on audio.
I don't think so, but I'm trying to connect it with the other one, but I haven't connected yet.
Russell, can you put on mute and turn off your video just for now? Well, I want to make sure the sound is okay.
Okay, and also, can you let Ian in, because he's going to present 2 and 3. Yeah?
Okay.
I'm just going to mute myself now anyway.
Okay. All right, then everyone can hear at least, and we can see all the board members. And so we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. It's 9:07 a.m. on September 25th, 2020. It's the meeting of the Board of Land and Natural Resources. Thank you all for being here. Due to the COVID situation, we are meeting by Zoom. Participants, board members are in the meeting with our deputies AG. And we have people who have signed up to either present or to testify on matters signed up in advance. We have them in the waiting room. We will call you for your item. And otherwise, this is being broadcast live on YouTube. So thank you all for being here. We have received written testimony as well. And the written testimony that was received by yesterday, at least, is posted on our website with the agenda. So thank you for accommodating us during COVID-19. And with that, I'm going to ask Member Gahn if he would please read our standard contested case statement. Which is not here. Let me find it.
Sam, you're on mute.
Yes, sorry about that.
Do you have it, Sam?
I do now. In some of the matters before the board, a person may wish to request a contested case hearing. If such a request is made before the board's decision, then the board will consider the request first before considering the merits of the item before it. A person who wants a contested case may also wait until the board decides the issue, then request the contested case after the decision. It's up to you. Any requests must be made in writing within 10 days. And if no request for a contested case is made, the board will make a decision. The department will treat the decision as final and proceed accordingly.
Okay, thank you very much. First up on the agenda is A1, the minutes of the July 24, 2020 board meeting. Board members, any comments to the minutes? There's no public testimony on this. If not, does somebody want to make? Okay, thank you.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay, so we have voting, member Tommy Oy, myself, Suzanne Case, Vernon Char, Sam Gon, Kaivi Yoon, Chris Ewan, and James Gomes. So that passes unanimously, thank you. All right, next up, we have item C1, and we have some people joining the meeting for this. Okay, I think that's everyone who has signed up in advance on this item. If there's anyone else, actually that is everyone. So everyone who has signed up in advance by yesterday morning is now in the meeting. Okay, so C1. Dofa, go ahead. David, you're on mute.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay. Okay, C1 is a request to approve dispositions of land that the Waianae Community Redevelopment Corporation acquired with a grant from the Land Conservation Fund in Waianae, Oahu. The quick summary is that WCRC would buy back 1/3 of an acre out of 11 acres. The purpose is, okay, C1 is a, got a little bump there, okay. Anyway, they're looking to buy back 1/3 of an acre out of 11 acres so that they can get a federal grant. But with the federal grant, the feds need to be the lead on the property. And so we're looking to do a condominium regime, pull 1/3 of an acre out so they can build a processing facility to service their farm operation. This is the folks doing businesses, Ma'o Farms, Ma'o Organic Farms. So it's pretty complicated. You can, you've read the submittal. Dave Penn will be here to explain any technical aspects of it if you want. We feel that it's in the interest of the state because it will support the organic farm that the land was purchased to operate under. And they got a terrific program. They work with a lot of at-risk youth. They produce, fabulous agricultural products. It's just a great community program. Even though we have to pull this 1/3 of an acre out, it's still going to support the majority of the acreage that we've helped them to purchase through our land legacy program. So we feel it's really kind of consistent with the program goals going forward. The funds, they're basically buying back 1/3 of an acre, and the funds will go back in the land legacy program. So if you got any questions on that, I'd be glad to answer them, or Dave Penn is probably here, I would guess, and he could answer as well.
Can I just add to that, just to help frame, because I did have an extensive discussion with staff about this. And because it is, as the submittal says, first impression, but legacy land funds were used to purchase this, I guess, 10.5 acre or so parcel, 11 acre parcel. And they have since purchased other agricultural lands as part of their, separately, as to add to their venture. Now they want to build a building to support their agricultural production. And they have funding to build it, I guess some federal grants and others to build it. It would be on just 1/3 of an acre, but in this parcel that was purchased with legacy land funds. So the proposal is to basically condominiumize it, to separate out the 1/3 of an acre and build the building on that and withdraw that from the legacy land project. So that's what's new about this. And so the question is, is it okay for something that's used legacy land funds to dedicate property to agriculture? And in this case, their proposal is to take it out, but to pay back the legacy land fund for that land, and with the assurances that it's for support of agricultural production, and that they have added other ag lands to their farm. Did I get that right, Davids?
Good morning, everybody. David Penn, Program Specialist for Legacy Land Conservation. Yes, this is a new thing for us. It's not the first time we've had a conflict between a federal grant program requirement and a state grant program requirement. But in all the other cases, we've been able to resolve it with the federal agency without having to come to the board for approval. In the submittal, you may have seen reference to Hawaii Revised Statute Section 173A-11, which is the general powers of the board to do all things necessary for the program. I think that Section 12, HRS 173A-12, may also provide some guidance here, which allows the board to comply with federal grant requirements in the interest of the Legacy Land Conservation Program. In this case, the restrictions are from the U.S. Department of Commerce Economic Development Administration. They're very similar to the legacy land restrictions, but they're for a limited period, 20 years in this case, instead of perpetual. And we've been working on this for quite a while, and we found at least 4 previous board actions that approved the Economic Development Administration covenants and mortgage interests. However, these all involve state land that was managed by state agencies or that was leased to other private and public entities. And so just want to stress that in this case, the state doesn't hold a property interest in the land, but the state holds rights and obligations to enforce deed restrictions, covenants, and statutory requirements that are associated with the ongoing management and disposition of the property. And so a complete and permanent buyout of the state's financial interest in a portion of the property is one scenario. And I think we may also hear from Waianae Community Redevelopment Corporation about another option for a discounted limited time buyout with a reversion of the property back into the Legacy Land Conservation Program after the 20-year life of the federal grant has expired. We do have some additional documents available that were not in the submittal, including an updated project site map, which shows the property in question and surrounding properties that are also owned, leased, or otherwise used by Ma'o Organic Farms. We have site plans for the new condominium, site photos of the existing condition of where the building would go. We have the mortgage form from Economic Development Administration, and also our legacy land statute and administrative rules. The participants that are here include the Waianae Community Redevelopment Corporation Executive Team, the Maui Organic Farms Operations Teams, and the project engineer and the attorney from the Economic Development Administration. We did receive, I believe, 2 written testimonies in support, one from the Trust for Public Land and one from TRA IPA and intern at Maui Organic Farms. So that's everything that I wanted to flag for now. If there's any further questions or discussions, we'll all be available. And I believe that the Waianae folks would like to testify at some point.
Okay, let's start with questions for staff from the board members. Board members, any questions? And we have muted everyone, so please unmute to ask your question.
The Chair, I don't have any questions for staff right now, but I would have some questions for Maui Farms.
Okay. Other
Chair,
questions?
yes, Chair, this is Sam Gon, board member. I will make a comment in that I've been following Maui Farms for quite a while and the Trust for Public Land acquisitions and the development of their program over the years, watching it grow and watching the very positive results that they've been able to put into place for the Waianae community. So I'm very interested in this project. I was looking forward to hearing what they have to say and their proposals.
Okay, any other questions, board members? If not, why don't we go ahead and hear from the applicant? Who wants to speak first? And if you're ready to speak, go ahead and unmute your phone. There you
Okay.
go.
Hello, Mai. I'll go first. I've got some young people outside, so maybe we'll go oldest to youngest. My name is Gary Maunakea IV. I'm one of the co-founders, and I'm currently the farm managing director. I just wanted to say, firstly, for Legacy Lands and for you folks at DLNR, it's been a wonderful 12 years now relationship with you folks. I think Legacy Lands program is one of the gems of a program that you folks have, and I think you know that. It's done amazing things to safeguard property. 12 years ago, we purchased this 11 acres. It's in question now. 3 years ago, we purchased another 21 acres. Subsequent to that 21 acre purchase, we actually purchased an additional 236 acres right across the street that was owned by the same folks, a development company that owned the 21 acres. And so now we have almost 300 acres, all now certified organic. And we're hustling along to get the larger piece of land in production. The 21 acres that you folks helped us purchase, that is now all completely cleared, and 3/4 of it is in production. So food that we're eating and growing and distributing now, and a lot of it is going to our communities by way of folks like the Waianae Coast Comprehensive Health Center because of the pandemic and the need to distribute food into our communities. Just quickly about the facility, we had built a long relationship with EDA through Gail Fujita, who encouraged us for years to, if you've been to Maui here, you know that we currently pack and process our vegetables in a recycled, repurposed chicken shed. So when we purchased the property from the Takahashi land with your assistance, there were 3 derelict chicken sheds. We cut one down to 150 by 35 feet, and we've been packing vegetables in that ever since. We'd like to raise the bar on our professionalism, I guess you would say. And this building that EDA is helping support is for want of a better term, a state-of-the-art, food safety certified wash, pack, processing facility. So, and it also has space to train people. So there really is nothing like it in existence on a farm in Hawaii. And we're spending a lot of time raising funds to automate some of our processes to increase the ability to produce food. So we've projected that with this facility and the land we have available, we can produce 10 times more food than we're producing now. And this year it's likely we'll hit 200,000 pounds of food that we produce. So this is a really big deal for us. It's a big development that we have been working on probably one way or another for the last 12 years. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you so much for your support. We really enjoy working with you folks and David. And James, if you wanted to ask the question now, I'm perfectly willing to.
Yes, thank you very much. First of all, I want to comment, you guys are doing a great job. I think it's one hell of an operation that you have there for the community and for the people of Waianae, or the, Oahu for that matter. The question I have is, what kind of crops do you plant, or fruit trees?
Mm-hmm. So we grow about 50 different products, probably 12 to 15, the majority. So this valley is has brilliant sunshine, beautiful high clay soil, verticil series soil. So we do a lot of leafy greens. We do a lot of the kales, the chards, lettuces, taro leaf. Soil's also conducive to root vegetables. So we actually produce taro root, beet, carrots, turnips, pretty much anything we can possibly put in the ground we try to grow. This summer we had a great run on tomatoes. And then because we own the land, which is I think absolutely critical for the future of agriculture in Hawaii, we are able to develop agroforestry systems. So we have a ton of ulu trees. On the 21 acres we've already planted, I think it's up to about 90 ulu trees, about 200 citrus trees, a lot of mango trees. On the 236 acres, a portion of that is a higher elevation, so we'll be able to experiment with cacao. We'll continue to plant more indigenous crops like niu and ulu. But yeah, it's great. The local market right now, whether it's farmers markets or the grocery stores, are rabid for anything that's local, and anything especially important to us that's organic as well. So the future for any agriculture right now in Hawaii that diversifies their product mix is really unbelievable. So that's a great question. Thank you.
Another question I have is, can you tell me what your annual income is from the farm? I mean, what do you guys make?
Yeah, the annual sales revenue, gross sales revenue for the farmers is for the last few years always been right under 700,000. That's been a barrier we haven't been able to break, with that being about 1/3 of the entire budget for the organization. This year, we've obviously farmed more of the 21 acres, and we have now 11 apprentices in our management program. We'll probably hit $700,000 in a couple of weeks. We project to make $1 million this year. And that's probably farming just a net 15 acres of all the land we have. So I'm talking about the very arable land that we use. So with all of this land in production in 10 years' time, we project to be able to make over $10 million and to fund about 90% of all of our education programs. That's the goal. Youth are part of that evolution. Some of them have gone through our high school internship programs and into college, and now they're running the farm now. And I firmly believe if we are to ever be successful in agriculture in Hawaii, we need young local talent dedicated to this movement.
You've answered my question. My next question was going to be, how much of the kids or you students stay into the farming industry or our ag industry, because it's so important for the next generation to continue on. So you've kind of answered my question. Thank you so much. And great job. Great job. Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you. And Gary, I see that you're in the waiting room. I apologize. We didn't get you admitted. So we can do it now, or you can stay there if you prefer.
Hey, aloha kako, aloha chair, aloha board members. It's wonderful to see everyone. My name is Kukui Mauna Kea Fourth. Our ohana comes from Nanakuli, and we're so blessed to be able to work in this ahupo'a of Lualuale. And now that we have, this Puhawai property and the Palikea property, we really see the importance of our AINA as an asset, as a resource for the feeding, for the health, for the economic vitality of our community. Gary did such a good job. I really don't need to say anymore, except that right now we are in a crisis in terms of education, and the impacts of our role as educators cannot be understated. And so I'm really fortunate and blessed to be able to work with a few of the people in the room today and a few of the students that have joined us to offer their testimony in support of this important disposition. We didn't expect that, but just like everything else, we are learning and growing in this, and our opportunity to teach what we learn through our lived experience to this next generation, our specialists, our youth empowerment specialists, our vocational workforce specialists, and how they are mentoring the leaders that are coming after them. I think that is super important. And that was all I needed to say. So I wanted to pass it over to our team. There.
Okay. Who wants to speak next? Just raise your hand and turn off your mute. Yeah, there you go.
All right, I'm gonna distance a little bit so I can take off my. Aloha, my name is Tori Lynn Smith. I've been at Mount Organic Farms for the last 3.5 years as the youth empowerment specialist here. And so my role is really tied to the programs that we have and the young people that we serve in community. And in terms of this project and the expansion and how it's kind of unfolding, I'm not in all the nitty gritty details of land and the facilities, but I do know that I've been able to be a part of the journeys of young people in our community and have witnessed the space in its ability to transform young people. And so we have a young person here with me today to speak. And I think, again, Gary and Kukui did a wonderful job of explaining all of that. And yeah, I really want her to be able to share and share her journey and her voice. So I'm gonna pass it to one of our elder interns who has moved through our high school internships, our YLT internship, our youth leadership training internship, and now is in a ho'ovaivai position, moving into a bachelor soon. So I will hand it over to her now.
Mahalo.
Aloha, my kako.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Yes, thank you. My name is Emmeline David. I'm a student, but also a farmer. So I'm gonna talk about how I met Ma'o and how long I've been here and why I'm still here. So I met Ma'o when I was in high school during my junior year. And from that moment, I just know this is my second home. So coming here ever since high school was a blessing. It was a great opportunity, and I would never regret that decision I made in high school, because from now, I was like, I'm a different person that I can tell, because I've been working here for 2 years now, and I'm finishing up with my associate. And now that I'm finishing up with the 2 years, I'm now in a different role of leaderships, of doing this ho'ovaivai youth leadership training. So what I do right now is work with Brianne, that will spoke in a moment, but we work together to figure out what I wanted to do in the future as my future career. So being here really helped me to understand the importance of farming and the importance of feeding the community and the importance of why education is really important for our community in Waianae. So for me as a youth, I really appreciate this program, because it's not only helping me, but it helps me with my health, with my education, and with my safety of knowing that I have a home to come to and learn from and get my food from, and to ask for support. So being here, working here as a student, but also a farmer, it's a blessing because I'm able to share and also gain at the same time to help my family and my friends and my future generations. So yes, I love working here as a farmer. Like, I don't know if you guys can, if you have the time to come and check us out, it's all young farmers, no elders to elders. Like, you guys will be surprised. And I can't wait to have you guys come if you guys can. But yeah, I'm not really faking anything, but this is how I really feel about this program because it's just a blessing. Like, I don't know if I would be this person if I wasn't here. And I'm just really thankful to Auntie Kukui, Uncle Gary, and all the managers and Tori. They helped me a lot, and I will never forget that. And being able to actually have this expansion for the facility, I think that's a perfect idea, not just for me, but for our generations, for my generations to know that we have a hope in our community to come back to and work for our community and help everybody that we have here. Like I think and I believe that we have a hope with this program. And I hope you can tell that I'm really nervous, but I also love to share my story. And yes, thank you.
Thank you very
Excuse,
much.
I have a question for you, young lady.
Oh, okay, yes.
Being that you're one of the internships and being that, you know, you have this huge passion for our ag industry, which is wonderful, I would like to ask you, because you're organic, so we're not using herbicides, what other methods are you using to curb the bug infestation on your crops? Besides, you're not using herbicides.
Besides that, we have to know how to take care of our soil. So we have to rotate every once in a while. We cannot reuse it without taking care of it. That way, bugs and different organisms are being fed and well feeded, because we also need to take care of the soil in order for it to have a great impact for our plants. So it's like we're helping the soil to help our plants so that the plants can help us. So also one thing is always weed. Weed is a great and the one solution that we have for our farm. Weeding is one thing that I learned from when I was in high school. That is really, yes.
Good answer. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. That was very informational and entertaining. Okay, who else wants to say something? Yes, go ahead.
Aloha, everybody. Well, how do I even follow that up? But thank you so much for having us here today. My name is Brianne Imada, and I'm the Alewife Vocational and Workforce Development Specialist here at Ma'o. My position was created alongside this expansion, including the facilities project that we're talking about today, to really highlight and training that the youth are receiving on the farm. So ME is a perfect example, you can see, of not just the technical farming knowledge that youth are experiencing on the farm, but also how they're able to make connections to their education, to their wider community, and becoming leaders in agriculture and Aloha Aina fields. So I honestly don't have too much to add beyond what Gary shared and beyond what Emmy shared as well. But just, I guess, a little bit about my story also. I just moved back home from California after doing my higher education there. And for me, it's really a joy and a privilege to be at Ma'o and to be at an organization that is so committed to the community, so committed to building up youth, and so committed to Aloha Aina and everything that we do here. So I'm also available for further questions, but yeah, just really appreciated what the rest of the team already had to share.
Thank you very much.
With that, maybe we'll ask Wei if she had anything to contribute in terms of like project facilities.
Aloha, everyone. My name's Wei. I've been working specifically on sort of stewarding, getting the EDA funded new facility built. We are just finishing all of our building permits right now, and kind of running in between the farm operations and farm expansion project fundraising and shepherding the new facility building project. So I'm here to answer any questions you folks may have about our progress on the project. Our project engineer from the EDA, Chris Labosco, is also here too, as well as our attorney who's been helping us through this, David Austin. So if you have questions about the specific request for the disposition, where we are on our building project and all that, we're all here to help fill you in.
I have a brief question.
Go ahead.
So Wei or any of the others, one of the questions that I always ask applicants is if they're okay with the conditions and the staff recommendation that's before us, or if there are any modifications or other aspects that you wanted to make sure were brought to our attention, that we could hear them. So I invite you to do that now.
So I may ask David, our attorney, to help a little bit with this. We understand that if we are granted this request to pursue a CPR, create 2 units, and separate out the smaller unit, which will be the footprint of the new building, there are a number of steps that we need to take in order to do that. Go through the proper condo process, and draft all the documents with the correct language that represents exactly what EDA needs in order to release their funding and what your board, BLNR, would like to ensure stays in place. And I think in general, Ma'o is okay with those conditions. We understand why your board is asking for those conditions, and they make sense to us. There may be some specifics that we need to work out, especially with what the buyout price is going to be or how that's going to be calculated. And so we're prepared to discuss that today and make sure we're all on the same page. I think we're almost there, but you know, the devil's always in the little details.
Okay.
So David, you're muted right now.
Did you want to add anything, Mr. Austin?
Wei did an excellent job of explaining the current status of things, and I just felt that when we had started discussing this, I felt that creating a 2-unit condo would be kind of easy, because then the DLNR could keep whatever covenants or conditions they want on the legacy lands, and EDA could kind of, because they're really very similar, EDA could have their kind of required covenants and conditions on the other units. So I don't see this as being a particularly complicated process, because this isn't like a traditional condo where you're selling units for sale to the public. It's that's really what the condo statute has all those rules and regulations around. It's like a consumer protection thing, but it can be used, as we all know, for like a million other purposes. So I think it's flexible enough that it'll work out quite well here. So
I guess I'll get right down to the point and ask whether or not there are any modifications to the staff recommendation that you would propose, or if we can just move forward with approving the staff recommendation.
Sorry, this is Wei again. I understand that Ma'o had also requested an opportunity to consider a discounted sort of buyout price based on the fact that EDA's interest in our project and in the useful life of the building is only 20 years, whereas DLNR's covenants and deed restrictions run in perpetuity. I think I might also defer to Gary and Kukui, and Chris Labosco might also be able to talk a little bit about what EDA's process is when we fulfill the 20-year commitment. Because I understand that there may be just some little details there that we all want to be clear about to ensure that the building and all the land surrounding it stays in its intended use, which is to support local agriculture.
Okay, any other questions?
I do, Chair, and this is for
Yeah.
Gary. Hey, Gary, this is Board Member Gomes. I'm curious, I seen a picture with the young ladies and there was a greenhouse in the back. What's the application for the greenhouse? And your crops that you have, what's the percentage on the ground, or the application, do you have crops in the greenhouse? I'm just curious.
They're just starter transplants. So we just use it to start things like kale, eggplant, a whole bunch of different onions, some trees, those kinds of things. So it's a small greenhouse. It's not, we don't grow any sprouts or anything like that in the greenhouse. We have really good soil, really good sun. So we tend to plant what we know works now, because we've been doing this for 20 years. So there are some things we know we can't grow and we have a hard time with. Your question about organic systems and crop protection is one we've spent 20 years teasing out what we can grow. So yeah, we just start transplants in the nursery.
Okay, that's all I need. Thank you.
Let me just sort of wrap this up. Was there a suggestion that the submittal needed to be amended to provide some further flexibility in case of reestablishing this after 20 years, or is the submittal okay as is?
How many Daves?
Dave Austin, can you help sort of describe the different options we have at the end of EDA, at the 20-year mark for the EDA? That would be helpful.
Yep, sure, be happy to. So one of the options when Mao was discussing and EDA was discussing the sort of the 20-year, I guess you could say, for lack of a better word, lien or covenant on this land, it could technically revert back to the DLNR Legacy Lands program. And the way you can do that is a million ways. One of which is you can record sort of an option that gives the DLNR like a right to readmit the land back. You can give the DLNR like a right of first refusal. You can't really do an automatic reverter, I think, because at the end, Chris might be able to, or someone from EDA might be able to clarify this, but it's not sort of like an automatic reversion that can happen. I think EDA has to do a once over and make sure that before it releases its lien on the parcel, that Mao complied with all of the terms of the grant throughout the course of the grant term. And it's kind of like almost like a rubber stamp they have to do. It's not really like this analysis, but they need to sort of, I think, formally release the property. So, and that's only in terms of the option in which there's a 20-year period during which there are these two separate condos, and then after 20 years, the smaller parcel goes back to DLNR. So we're just talking about that second option, not the first option, which is there's, the smaller parcel is taken kind of free and clear of any other liens. So.
Okay, I'm going to suggest that we go ahead and move with the agenda item as is. If you guys go through this and there's some other piece of it that you work through that works, that you all agree works, and you think would be a better option, we can always bring it back before the board for approval. But for now, it seems like you've worked out a proposal that should be workable, and why don't we just go with it now? So any further comments, questions, board members? Otherwise, we will.
I very happily move to approve staff recommendation.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All right, any further discussion? All right, if not, all in favor, say aye.
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 I see 7 votes unanimous in favor. Okay, thank you very much. Good luck, everyone. And we'll see you when we see you if we need to. Okay, thanks a lot.
Awesome job.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Okay, next up is item D1, and we do have some people joining us for this one, so give us a second.
Sorry, Chair, did you mean D2?
Sorry, I did mean D2.
Okay.
Aloha Chair, are we ready for our item?
Can you give me just a second? I want to make sure. So number one, we have a list of people who have signed up in advance to testify. And so I am making sure those people who are on our list are in the meeting. And, if there are other people who wanted to testify, I apologize. We are trying to keep a clear process that's fair to everyone. So I'm going to include the people who I have on our list that signed up in advance by yesterday. So hang on one second. Okay, why don't we go ahead now with this? And if you are in the waiting room, but you didn't sign up, I'm going to ask you to please just go ahead and listen on the YouTube. Okay, go ahead, D2. Ian.
Okay. Good morning, Chair, members of the board. My name is Ian Hirokawa with Land Division, and I'll be presenting both items D2 and 3. D2 and similarly D3, which we'll get to, is we brought a similar project to the board before where DOA got CIP funding to do these projects in East Maui, basically to improve the Awai water, irrigation systems to benefit local small farmers, taro farmers. And we brought a previous project to the board before, and what this involves is one, giving a right of entry to DOA for it's actually on the adjacent parcel, but DOA for a staging area, and in this case a long-term easement to a local nonprofit, Maui Mixer, who will, once the project is done, get an easement to conduct future repair and maintenance of the Awai improvements to, and because the nonprofit basically is made up of a lot of local farmers, taro farmers, so they do benefit from the project, and but they're also a community group involved in local agriculture, sustaining local food production, and as well as education and other sustainability initiatives. So essentially, like I said, we're asking for the right of entry and the easement of, and also the easement at gratis to the nonprofit. The nonprofit is a 501c3 qualified, so they do under HRS 171-43.1 do qualify for nominal rent under the statute. So we are requesting that they for that to be approved for them. There we have, I think, both representatives from DOA and the nonprofit here to discuss the project further, and I'll be available for any questions. Thank you.
Dawn Chang, did you want to go ahead?
Yeah, thank you very much. Good morning, Chair and members of the Board of Land and Natural Resources. Thank you so much for the opportunity to come before you on item D2. And as Ian indicated, this is a follow-up from our July 10th meeting where we brought forth the Honopo land disposition. So also, people did sign up to attend this or to be present for this meeting, and they included Janice Fujimoto and Kurt Psyche with Department of Ag.
Yes, we have them. We have them in the meeting. Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to briefly go over the presentation, and then I'm going to turn it over to Puna, who's going to describe the specific emergency Awai project in Kenai. And then there are members of the Kenai, Namahi Ayo Kenai board who would like to say a few words to the board. So with that being said, as Ian said, in 2018, $4.5 million was set aside CIP funds. DOA wanted to make sure that these were being driven by the community. So there was a robust community engagement process. As a result of that, based upon objective criteria, which included use of state lands, not private lands, projects that preserved and protected the traditional customary Native Hawaiian rights, projects that had community support or at least no opposition, and projects that could be timely designed, permitted, and procured by June 2020. We needed to encumber those funds. So 3 projects were identified. The first one we brought forward in July was Honopo. D2 is Kenai, and right after this will be Wailuanui. So all 3 projects involve emergency stabilization of existing traditional awais. We're not proposing to do any new improvements. And Puna will give you more detail. I just want to briefly cover over the regulatory process. There was DOA determined that this was an exempt under 343. It was published in OAQC Bulletin and no appeals. Army Corps of Engineers also issued a determination letter that they have no jurisdiction over this proposed project, as with the other 3. SHPD did respond to our letter for determination and requested that an archaeological monitoring plan be prepared for this project, and a plan has been submitted for their review and approval. Once that gets approved, we have submitted an application to the County of Maui for SMA. We believe the project is going to be exempt from development, but we have submitted the application and they're awaiting SHPD's concurrence letter. OHA did respond to the consultation. They encouraged us to continue to work with the community on this project. And the Commission on Water Resource Management, did determine that this was not part of their jurisdiction, as they don't regulate awai. So the current status is on June of 2020. Department of Ag did receive several bid proposals to ensure we could encumber the funds, although no contracts have been awarded pending approval of the right of entries, not only this land disposition, but as well for the private lands that we're going to have to go through to get access, as well as in some cases staging. So with that, we are coming before you, as Ian said, to request immediate right of entry, construction right of entry for DOA, and then the long-term easement to Maui Mixer doing business as Namahi Ai Okeanai. So I'm going to ask Puna now to give you a brief overview of the specific project. And then after that, I'd like to provide the community an opportunity to speak to the board. Thank you. Go ahead, Puna.
Okay.
Hello, Chair and board members. I'm going to share my screen. Can you guys all hear me okay?
Can you just state your full name for the record, please?
Puna Kaniakua. I'm with AECOM. Okay, hold on. Here we go. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so as Don mentioned, this project is in KNI, and as with most of the projects, we're doing emergency repairs on the existing Awai system to ensure future water flows down to the Lo'ikalo. So here on the right, you can see the system down in KNI gets water from the Pi'ina'ao stream. You can see it in the aerial photo on the left, and it's carried across to the top of the farms via a flume that crosses the stream, and then it hits a diversion box that splits the flow to the various loikalo in the area. And our proposed repairs are to this diversion wall here. So currently there's a diversion wall here. That's an existing wall that appears to be built when the diversion structure was built. But this diversion here is just comprised of an earthen berm with rocks. So there's a lot of maintenance that goes into ensuring the water flow in this area, because it's always experiencing water flow, and periodically there'll be erosion where rocks or debris will fall into the adjacent awai and block flow down to the loikalo. So this diversion box carries water all the way, splits water and carries it all the way down to the Makai side of the peninsula. And so the most affected area is this channel here, which carries the water the furthest. So what we're proposing to do is just to mirror this concrete structure here and replace this earthen berm with a concrete wall, just to provide consistent water flow without the need to constantly maintain. And this is basically to prevent, a catastrophic failure of earth and rocks washing into the awai and cutting off water flow to the loikalo down on the Makai side. And I think, and in addition to that, we'll be stabilizing the banks and the base of the awai with some rocks and grouted riprap, just to reduce the amount of maintenance needed to keep the water flowing to the loi.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. Okay, do you want to have other representatives that have signed up? I think we have some in the meeting here.
Yes, Chair. Case, there's Mitch Pichet. He's with Namahiai Okeanai. And we also have, and I'll let Max, and they're,
sorry, can you, I don't, what was the name again?
Max Pichet.
Yeah, I don't see that. I see the name is signed up, but I don't see it.
Is Windows not open?
I have Max on the cell phone. For some reason,
Okay.
not getting in. So I'll allow him to talk through my Zoom on the cell phone.
All right. And
So-
Kule is also with Namahiai Okeanai. There might also be Dan Clark, as well as we have Chauncey Pa, assuming that their Wi-Fi works. But
I see their names as signed up, and I don't see them in the waiting room. So
all right.
Sometimes it happens, just so everybody knows, if your full name isn't listed in the waiting room, sometimes what happens is you dial in and your computer has a name attached to it, but it doesn't necessarily say your name, and you can rename yourself while you're in the waiting room. You can go and rename the name that you signed up in the waiting room, and also you can put the item number that you've signed up for. And because sometimes when you call in by phone, usually when you call in by phone, we can't necessarily identify you. And so, yes, so please go ahead.
Okay, so yeah, Max, you're on.
Okay, my name is Max Pichai, and I am with Namahiai Okeanai. And I've been farming down there for about almost 25 years maybe, and helping out farmers there. We've been trying to coordinate the maintaining of this ditch, because the farmers over the years have moved on. A lot of people between the age of 18 and 40 has either left for better life for their family, jobs, careers, and left farming. So get the kupuna and get the keiki out there. So we started a nonprofit to kind of bridge that gap and help everyone with opening up the patches that's been overgrown and haven't been used for years, and help people put food on their table, as well as market whatever extra produce that they grow out there. And there hasn't been anyone to clean the ditches much, other than one or two farmers who can still cross the flume and do the manual heavy work. So it's been Chauncey Kimokeo, myself, Ira Kimokeo, a few of the people on the landowner, William Latham, that's been going up and cleaning it. This improvements will really help us continue to get water. During this short water time, we've been up there almost every day for the last several weeks, trying to clean it, clear it, get as much water as we can, because a lot of our taro patches has been dry, just with the minimal amount of water to survive.
Mahalo, Max.
Okay,
this is board member Gan. I just wanted to point out that what you're doing is amazing, and I'm hoping that everyone who's testifying agrees that this is a worthwhile project. I think that the board members are really well aligned with approval of this proposal. So just wanted to make sure that you're clear of that.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, and then I'll add in, you know, a little about the work they've been doing over the past year. They did get a grant from Hawaii People's Fund, so they immediately took in the heavy equipment to clear out overgrown land or fallow land. They just got a kupu internship for full-time staff, and that's going to be going through all the farms in Kenai and supporting the farmers with their crops. And they're partnering with Ka'ehu, a nonprofit I work with, and we just partnered recently with UH Maui College Extension Services in hopes to get more support out there to the farmers and the community. So they're doing a really great job, and the Mahi'aio Kenai helps all the farmers on the peninsula. So yes, I agree. I really appreciate the work they're doing, which is why I do, you know, dedicate my time in helping them with the admin side, but on boots on the ground, they're really there for the community. So mahalo for this opportunity.
Mahalo Yahweh Kupune.
Mahalo.
Thank you. Okay, we have, let's see, a couple other people, Kirk Saiki, I think, and Janice Fujimoto. Did you want to add anything? Okay, hearing none. Board members, any other questions?
Hello. Hi, this is Janice Fujimoto from the Department of Ed. Sorry,
Go
there's
ahead.
a car going on behind me. Anyway, I just wanted to thank you all for hearing our case today and considering this right of entry request and easement request that's being put forth for you. We're really excited about not just this project in D2, but all of the projects that are being put forth as part of this larger CIP work that we're trying to do to help the Lo'ikalo farmers in the East Maui area. So thank you very much for your support. And you know, our project team with AECOM and Ku'iwalu have been really instrumental in helping us to work with the community so we can try to do these projects in the best way possible. So thank you, everybody.
Okay, thank you so much, and thank you for your work on it. All right, Kirk Saiki, did you want to add anything? Okay, I think that was it. Board members, any other questions? All right, if not, somebody want to make a motion to approve D2 as submitted.
Move to approve D2 as submitted per staff recommendation.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Yep.
Second from Mr. Char. Okay, any further discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay, that's a unanimous vote. Thank you so much. Good luck to everyone. I hope it works well.
Mahalo nui loa.
All right,
Also,
mahalo.
thank you so much.
Okay, we're going to move to D3.
D3 is again very similar project. Hawaii stabilization, this time in Wailua Nui instead of in East Maui. Again, we have DOA managing the project itself, the stabilization project, and nonprofit Namoku Aupuni o Ko'olau Hui for the ongoing repair and maintenance of it once the project is completed. And again, you know, the organization is a 501c3 nonprofit, so the board is asked to approve the easement disposition at gratis under HRS 171 43.1. Again, since the applicants are here, I guess, I'll turn that over for a little bit more greater description of the project itself. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Chang, did you want to go ahead?
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you very much, Chair and members of the board. So I'm not going to go into great detail on this, as you just heard our presentation in D2, but this is specifically in relationship to Wailuanui. So I'm going to have Puna will give you greater detail on the specific Auwai emergency project. And then the members that we have present here, we have, as you can see, Mahealani Went. We also have Jerome Kikivi, Norman Martin, and Early Inoy. They are all members of Namoku Ho'olahui, and they would like to also provide the board a few words after Puna's presentation. Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna share my screen again. So, can you guys, hold on. Okay, can you guys see the Wailuanui map? Okay. So this system, Auwai system, carries water from up at Hana Highway here and conveys it along this Auwai down to the farms in Wailuanui. And there's offshoots from this red line here. This system, or this Auwai, has undergone some severe erosion.
Wait, hang on.
Yeah, and
okay, go ahead.
Okay, so this Auwai has undergone some erosion. This is just a snapshot here, and you can see it's hard to even tell where the limits of the Auwai are, and that's due to erosion, rocks falling in, vegetation, and just years of wear and tear. And over the years, it's become hard to maintain just because access has become unsafe. So what our proposed project is to do is just to come in and reestablish the limits of this Auwai and to shore it up and stabilize it. Similar means with KNI, with some guarded riprap.
I did.
And that will allow, long-term maintenance to be reduced just because you'll have a more stable surface in there, as water is a consistent flowing thing through here. So we wanted to make it safe to access so that future it can be maintained, and then basically allowing water flow to be maintained, because if water flow doesn't get through this portion of the Auwai or through this Auwai system, the entirety of the valley is without water. So that would be a huge detriment to the Lo'ikalo in that area. Anybody have questions?
Thank you. Any questions, board members? Well, why don't we go ahead and hear from the community members who want to testify. I see Mahealani Went there.
Aloha. Actually, Junior Kikivi is the president of Namoku, and he was supposed to say a few words on behalf, but I will go ahead and do that.
Wait, I do think we have somebody who is.
Hi, Auntie
Oh,
Junior.
there he is. Okay,
Okay.
let Junior.
Okay, go ahead.
Hey, aloha, Chair. Aloha, Board.
Aloha.
Yeah, my name is Jerome Kikivi Jr., president of Namoku Aupuni Ho'olahui, a 501c3 nonprofit organization whose members are the lineal descendants of the original settlers and current tenants in the adjacent Ahupua'a of Kenai and Wailuanui in East Maui. Many of our families farm taro and live traditional subsistence lifestyles on an everyday basis. The right of entry request before this board would enable Namoku to maintain a major Auwai after CIP-funded construction work to repair is completed. There are approximately 200 acres of Lo'ikalo in the area, and with the restoration of streams, our families are slowly returning to the land and farming taro again. The Auwai that was damaged by erosion, rock slides, and falling debris is the major source of water for our valley below. We would like to express our appreciation to members of the legislature, especially Jill Tokura, who chaired the Senate Ways and Means Committee that originally appropriated funds for this project in 2016. We would also like to thank Senator Kalani English and Representative Lindy Coit for helping to secure the CIP monies to do this project, as well as similar projects in Kianai and Honapo. We wish to thank Governor Ige, who took the personal interest in this project and made sure the funds were released. We also would wish to express our appreciation to the Department of Agriculture and consultant Kuivalu for steering and vetting this project through a very thorough community consultation and coordination process. And we would also like to thank the board for approving COWORM's recommendation in 2018, which resulted in a historic restoration of East Maui streams. And finally, we would also like to thank the board for considering our request for right of entry in order that our community members can maintain the awai after this project is completed. Our ancestors built this awai, which originates many miles up Mauka and carries water to our Wailuanui homestead. Akosami was the long life steward of this awai and food maintenance until he passed away 10 years ago. His grandson Bush Martin and Vice President of Namoku joins us today. Thank you. And I and other members of Namoku are available to answer any questions you guys might have. Thank you, board.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Great to see this moving forward. All right, who else wants to say something? Let's see. I think we had. Is there anyone else who is wanting to testify on this?
I just want to add that the map that Puna shared doesn't really, you can't really tell that the terrain is actually like a cliff and is a steep drop off. And that's part of the reason why the erosion has made it so dangerous. It isn't only miles long, it's also, you know, very steep. And that's part of the reason why access has been more difficult in recent times. I remember years ago when we invited through the Huikalo organization 400 families from Kupuna to Keiki to come and help put full maintenance on that awai. And it was no problem because the awai at that time was very well maintained and there was no you know, erosion and what's happened subsequently. So what we're hoping through this project is to restore it so that it will once again be accessible so that we can continue to maintain it safely. So thank you very much for your consideration. And it's really nice to see everybody. Thank you. Aloha.
Thank you.
Mahalo,
I see,
Aloha.
thank you very much. I see Amanda Martin. Are you ready to testify? Okay, wait, I'm gonna ask you to unmute your, now press unmute on the bottom of your screen. There you go.
Get in touch with the board secretary. I think it's 15 minutes. So I an email in.
Okay, are you ready to testify?
Be aware.
Okay, so is this to just view or does he testify?
You can just go ahead now on your computer.
Okay, but other than that, he can just sit and watch.
We can.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay,
Bye.
thank you.
All right, I'm gonna put you back on mute. Sounds like, oh. Did you want to testify? Just say yes or no. Yes, no.
No.
Okay.
He's just here as a resource.
Got it. Thank you so much. Okay, appreciate that. Aloha. All right, I think that's it. Any other questions, board members?
Yeah, Chair, this is Kaiwi. Don, did I hear correctly that the CIP appropriation happened in 2016? Is that correct?
No, it was 20, I'm sorry, it was 2018.
Oh, okay.
So we're good.
I wanted to clarify that the original bill was actually introduced in 2016, and it was I guess, activated in 2018. But the original bill was introduced in 2016. It didn't pass because it didn't pass originally because there was a question as to whether the project would benefit only private parties, meaning the farmers, and they wanted to have assurance that it was for a trust purpose. So the bill was reintroduced in 2018 and vetted through the legislature, and they were assured that it complied with, the state's mandate that it was for a trust purpose. So that was when the second bill was introduced, but it really originated in 2016.
Okay, but you guys are close to receiving the funding, or has that been released from DOA?
Yes, it's been encumbered because the contracts went out to bid, but I mean, the projects went out to bid, but the contracts have not been awarded at this time. There's negotiations. They came in a little higher than what was estimated. So there is some discussions going on, as well as securing these land dispositions to ensure that we have access. So we're on the final leg, but assuming we don't change anything and we get these right of entries and these land dispositions, DOA is optimistic about issuing those contracts soon.
Thanks, Don.
Thank you very much.
Okay, any other questions, board members? Hearing none, somebody want to move to approve D3 as submitted? Jimmy, can you unmute and move to approve?
Move to approve per staff's recommendation.
Thank you. All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that's 7 board members unanimous. Thank you, everyone. And thank you for all your work on it. It's good to see you all, and really happy again to see this moving forward. Aloha.
Thank you.
Aloha.
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 Aye.
Okay,
Aloha.
we're going to take a 10-minute break.
Okay, I go to my computer right now. Okay.
Right now.
Okay, got it.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, cuz.
only device I have on is my iPhone and the iPad. That's the only thing I have. And the iPhone, I keep it on is because sometimes they text me, right? And so I look at it, but that's the only thing, and I try to stay unmuted all, most of the time. That's what I did. No, not at all, no. No, not at all, not at all, no. No, it's pretty wide open, all open beam ceiling and all. Maybe the open beam. Yeah, this home is 5,500 square feet and it's all open beam. I don't have it, but I could purchase one. So let me ask you this. If I buy I have this mic earphones that you want to airplane, would that work? No. Okay, so I have to buy one with a microphone, but does an iPad have a provision where I can plug it in? Yeah, mine is right up to the side of the iPad. I got a brand new iPad, but it has a flat bar that where you charge it and so forth, Okay, could you text me all that so I can go, and where do I buy this? No, no. Yeah, the iPhone, you have the one that you stick in your ear, the white color on the cable. Yeah, but my new iPad has a different, well, it's a connector, yeah, because the iPhone will run Puka, yeah, and then the new iPad, I don't see a Puka for that. Only that we put the charging cable.
Okay, we are going to come back in session here. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Waiting for member Ewan. All right. Okay, we're going to move on to item D4.
Morning, board members. Russell Tsuji for Land Division. Item D4 is a staff recommendation to deny a petition for a contested case. At the prior meeting back in June, we took up the board approved the granting of a revocable permit in the Hana area to Ms. Hayward, and the petitioners, Mr. and Mrs. Livingston, was present at that meeting or participated in that, or was able to participate. They did not request a contested case at the end of the meeting, but they did submit a written request to the department. And so we're coming here before the board after reviewing the petition, recommending a denial of the request for a contested case. We did not find any property interest that they had, that the Livingstons had in the revocable permit property. And really they have no right to demand a fence fee around it, around that whole property, which is actually our property. And the board, just to remind the board, in the Hayward decision, you guys did have a condition about access to the shoreline. And just to remind the board too, this parcel, the revocable permit parcel, does not actually go to the shoreline. It actually, you have to cross over another parcel, another state parcel. But that's it, unless you have any questions. I mean,
questions, board members? Okay, hearing no questions, we have one person who signed up to testify as a potential standby testimony. Anything you wanted to say, Mr. Harrington?
Aloha, board members. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you. I really don't have much to add. I've been assisting Ms. Hayward to get this permit. She's just about ready with her tax clearances, and the insurance is ready. So when we get the last piece in the mail, we'll be ready to permit. I support the denial of this. The Livingstons who who want the contested case do not abut the state land. They have Hana Highway on one side, County Road or the County Access Road on the two others, and then a different neighbor on the other side. They also do not abut Ms. Hayward. So I'm just available if you guys have any questions. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any further questions, board members? If not, does somebody want to make a motion to approve D4, denial of petition?
Move to approve D4 to denial.
Okay, Mr. Char, are you seconding? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's see, we have on the agenda, actually I'll have to check with our council here. We have agenda item, the next agenda item should have been labeled D6. It's labeled D4 also. Any issue with that?
D4.
Yeah,
D4 is what we at.
it's just, and I know there's two D4s on it. It's supposed to be 6.
Chair, I think I made that mistake on the participants list when I was moving things around. But on
Okay,
the
so-
agenda, I believe it's D6.
Agenda is the D6.
Correct.
Okay,
Yes.
all right, it's just on my notes here.
Because
Okay,
D5
thank you.
we're deferring, right?
Defer D5. Okay, we're moving now to D6.
Okay, D6 again is coming back to the board and asking for, you guys just took this up back in June and granting the easement for the growing to be constructed, and here we're coming back just asking for an immediate, the board granting an immediate construction right of entry so they can start construction. We'll be, and that we're asking that the board also authorize the chair to approve a removal bond in the case that they're not to get, the applicant is not successful in obtaining the later the any of the permits that are required for the construction of the growing. They do have a go ahead from OCCL. Go ahead, construct the project.
Okay, questions, board members? There's no public testimony on this item. If not, somebody want to move to approve D6 as submitted? Mr. Char, is there a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay, that is unanimous in favor of D6. Thank you very much. We'll switch into state parks now. And the first agenda item will be D1. We'll do a shift out here in the meeting. Mr. Char, is there a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor, say aye. All right, whoever joined, you'll need to turn off your YouTube. Thank you very much. And the item will be D1. We'll do a shift out here. Okay, so thank you.
Good morning,
everybody. Okay, wait. Let me just make sure we have the right people in here. I see somebody connecting still. Alan. Okay. 1, 2. Okay, we're good. Mr. Cottrell, E1. Turn off your YouTube. Wait. Kurt, do you have YouTube on?
Okay, hold on.
You have to actually turn off your YouTube. You'll get an echo. Oops. Okay, we're just waiting for Kurt Cottrell to sign back in. He was overly enthusiastic in turning off his YouTube.
Okay, apologies. I've gotten out of YouTube.
Okay, go ahead. E1.
Well, I'm really excited. Kirk Cottrell, Administrator, Division of State Parks. It's not too often I say I'm excited to pitch to the land board. And actually, I don't have much to say because this is not my story, but we're here to ask permission to authorize the chair to approve a construction of a Native Hawaiian burial memorial at the Nu'uanupali State Wayside and issue a right of entry to the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. This is a remarkable story, but I'm going to punt the presentation to my Assistant Administrator, Alan Carpenter, who has been colleagues with Eddie Ayau for quite a long time. So it's my pleasure to have Alan and then Eddie explain, this particular request that we have before you.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Good morning, Chair, board members. Alan Carpenter, Assistant Administrator with State Parks. As Kurt said, I'll mirror his comments. This is an exciting, it's also it's a humbling and really moving project that we have to present to you today on behalf of OHA and Mr. Ayau as a beneficiary. I think I would like to just give a little bit of background. My career in state parks started on the heels of the NAGPRA, Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act in 1990. And from that time, and in consultation with Mr. Ayau, who, I started my career as an archaeologist. He was the head of the burials program for SHPD. And we began a multi-year collaboration that, transcended even his position, so we worked with both Mr. Ayau, his colleagues and successors. State parks have for decades been a preferred location to repatriate human remains for a number of reasons, and we've always supported this. We often are like kipuka in seas of development, and so state parks are set aside for their natural and cultural values. So they retain an integrity of setting that other places don't. So in working with the burials program, Hui Malama and other Native Hawaiian groups, we have long facilitated dozens and dozens of repatriations in our parks, and do so willingly, and we welcome it. So, and then just as a brief personal note, I think my early career coming as a non-Hawaiian archaeologist was deeply influenced by my work with Eddie, and it's created a friendship that has lasted decades. And so I humbly ask that you let him now present this amazing story on behalf of himself, OHA, and again, we're grateful to just be a part of it.
Thank you. Mr. Ayau.
Aloha kākou, o Edward Hale aloha iau. He keiki Reynolds le aloha iau, ku makua kane, mai kanoa hine o marau mo niki ala ka eo. Ku makua hine mai holihoa molokai mai au. And thank you for allowing us to present this. This is a very significant story, and if I can figure out how to do share screen correctly, you will see that it actually begins with, shucks, I guess I don't know how to do it.
Wait, hang on, let me just make sure you can do. Yeah, you should be able to do it. Try it again.
Yeah. Okay.
You see this share screen button on the bottom of your?
Yeah, I see it.
Okay, there you go.
But how do I find the document?
I think you first find the document and then you go in here and share your screen.
Okay, got it. That I know how to do. Darlene, any chance you know how to do it?
So, Alan, Kurt, is this a document that we have?
I don't believe it is part of the submit.
No, because what I wanted to show the land board was that this matter actually begins by the efforts of William Patey, who, as many of you would recall, was chairman of DLNR in the 1990s. I was with the State Historic Preservation Division as the Barrows Program Administrator. And during that time, we sent out 200 letters of inquiry to museums from all around the world. Mr. Patey signed every single one of those. In fact, after 200, he asked me to stop because he was hurting his hand. But one of those inquiries went to Cambridge. And one of the documents I was hoping to share included the response from Cambridge University, from the Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology. And in that response, the museum indicated that they did not have any Hawaiian skeletal remains. And so the efforts that SHPD and DLNR was undergoing at that time to understand what was happening on the international level with respect to Cambridge came to a stop. However, I was also going to show you an internal memo that went from the museum director at Cambridge to his colleague in the physical anthropology department which involved the Duckworth Laboratory also at Cambridge. And in it, he informs him that there's this inquiry, and if you do have Hawaiian remains, to please respond. But the museum never responds. The laboratory never responds. So fast forward to the year 2010, a colleague of mine doing online research came across the Duckworth Laboratory's first publication of an online inventory of its collection. The Duckworth Laboratory is situated at Cambridge University in Cambridge, England. It houses approximately 18,000 human remains. And as it turns out, 20 of them were Native Hawaiian. And so that began a decade-long effort to gain the release of those ancestral remains, those iwi kupuna, from the Duckworth Laboratory in Cambridge University. The university is an 800-year-old institution. It had never repatriated human remains. Oh, here's the letter. Yes. So this is the letter from the director of the Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology to his colleague, Rob Foley, at the Department of Biological Anthropology, informing him that there's this inquiry by Mr. Patey regarding Hawaiian remains possibly in the museum collection or in the collection of the university. So in 2010, Hui Malami na Kupuna o Hawaii and the Office of Hawaiian Affairs made a request to Cambridge University, to the Duckworth Laboratory, to repatriate the ancestral remains that they had in their collection. In 2014, there was a face-to-face meeting to facilitate that. And in February of this year, well, let me back up. In November of 2019, the University Council of Cambridge University voted unanimously to repatriate all 20 iwi kupuna to the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. Again, it's historic because it was the first time it was ever done, but also because they are not, the Duckworth Laboratory and Cambridge University are not facilitating additional repatriation requests from the Maori, from the Australian Aborigines, from Native Americans, from the natives of Rapa Nui. So this case was significant because it was the first one granted by Cambridge. And I just wanted to make sure that the land board was aware that the initiative for this came from DLNR, came from Bill Patey, and his agreement to work with our Barrow Sites program to identify these iwi kupuna internationally. And so the kupuna were repatriated, returned home on March 1st. They have been curated privately until the reburial can occur. There are additional remains with part of this repatriation that have already been reburied through our cooperation with the Oahu Island Burial Council, the landowner, So now these are the last of the 20 that need to be reburied. They were collected from the base of Nu'uanupali by an English, I'm not clear what kind of a scientific practice he was, but he was someone who was observing the flora and fauna in Hawaii, and he kept very meticulous journals. And while he was doing so at the base of Nu'uanupali, he came across a site that he described as including several bodies, and he removed these 14 skulls from that site. So that's where we're at. We are hoping that they can be reburied at the top of Nu'uanupali and not at the bottom, pursuant to a proposal that the Office of Hawaiian Affairs has been developing. And my role with OHA is that I'm a volunteer with under the lead of Kamakana Ferreira, who's the compliance officer for OHA and repatriation matters. Thank you.
Thank you. And I Ferreira is here. Do you want to add anything?
I don't want to add too much, but you know, as Halealoha had shared, OHA has been working with him. You know, Hui Malama, they dissolved back in 2015, and OHA became the sole claimant on this particular claim, but we still maintain close contact with Hale. Actually, Hale went on the journey to the United Kingdom to pick up these iwi back in February this year. And when he came back, we've been in contact with state parks. We wrote a formal letter to those folks back in June. We did a site visit to the area because this area is state land. It's owned by DOT, but managed by state parks. And so we've been trying to get this going. And we know there are several other approvals that we're going to need. We're going to need to go to the State Historic Preservation Division. State Parks has already reached out to the Office of Conservation of Coastal Lands, and it looks like we got the okay from them. We want to do this in this fiscal year, if possible, and we're going to try and do it, granting your blessing and your approval. So let us know if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, questions of board members?
I have a question, Chair.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, when was this iwi kupuna taken to Cambridge? What year? And why was it taken out of Hawaii to go so far east?
There were actually 3 separate collections that from 3 separate donors, and the collectors. The collections started in 1866, and the third one was in 1903, and the purpose of the collections was to, this was during a time when colonialism was you know, huge in the world. And so Western thinkers were undertaking the effort of justifying colonialism. And one way that was done was through a worldwide search by all the so-called civilized countries, mainly from Europe, to collect human crania, mainly crania, from all over the world. Part of that was part of this practice called phrenology, and the aim was to be able to measure the volumes of human skulls, to make the argument that Westerners were superior biologically, and that's why the ability to control the rest of the world was a matter of manifest destiny. And so that was the reason why they did it. And so okay, sorry, go ahead.
So the another question is that if it's 1800s or 66 or something, then they had permission from the king to do it then, to take the iwi kupuna?
So they did not, and that's an excellent point. In fact, that is the point of this whole case. So in 1860, the legislature of the Kingdom of Hawaii enacts a law called for the protection of places of sepulture. And it was signed by Kamehameha IV. And what that law did is it made it a crime to remove the contents of a grave from the site. And so the basis for Cambridge University's determination to return these remains is because they occurred post 1860. Their acquisition was illegal. And as museums around the world are finally coming to terms with, illicit acquisitions are being returned.
Yeah, I mean, it's over 100 years. I mean, totally unacceptable. Wow, cool, great work.
Thank you.
Other questions? Yeah.
This is Kaivi. Out of curiosity, why at the top and not where they lay on the bottom as previous?
When you say curiosity, what do you mean?
Just wondering what informed the decision to bury them at the top and not where they originally were found?
Healing, mainly. To undo, one other thing I should disclose is that Cambridge insisted on physical examination of these remains because despite their historic documentation, they refused to recognize the veracity of those records and insisted on examination. All 14 skulls were cranially deformed. So there was a traditional practice amongst Ali'i to shape the skulls of the heads of babies when they were born, and they did that by wrapping kapa around their heads. Because when you're born, right, your cranial plates aren't fused yet, and so the kupuna, especially for Ali'i, would wrap kapa bark around their heads for periods of time to flatten the front and to flatten the back. So why did they do that? They did that, one, out of because as adults, people would be able to recognize their rank regardless of their regalia, of what they were wearing. They could recognize that they were people of status because their head was shaped. But number two, it's because they saw that, they thought of that as being very beautiful. Well, so one, all 14 skulls were shaped, and two, they were all female. So in our work on this, in our research of this, we interviewed Olohe Jerry Walker. And he described a battle that took place during the Battle of Nu'uanu, in which two regiments of all female units, one from Oahu and Maui, the other from Hawaii Island, engaged in battle prior to the skirmish that takes place at the cliffs. And so we believe that these po'o were of warriors that were female warriors that were engaged in the battle. And it was our view that part of the healing for this, for what happened, is to place them on top, number one. And number two is if you look at the rendering of the reburial site, to recognize that these were warriors. These were people of honor and of status who gave their lives for what they believed in. And so the short answer is that it was out of respect and as a matter of healing.
Mahalo.
Mahalo.
I have another question for you.
Yes.
Is it possible that with this iwi kupuna, the po'os, that you could identify if there was any family, a current family lineage or so of these females or males?
So one thing that was done, one question that came up during the repatriation process with Cambridge is they wanted to identify lineal descendants, and we made the argument that they were ill-equipped and qualified to do such a thing. And so we insisted that they do not, but that when they were repatriated, that OHA and DLNR through the Oahu Island Burial Council would do that instead. And so notice was published when we returned. One family came forward and was granted cultural descendant status by the Oahu Island Burial Council at this month's Burial Council meeting. But in terms of being beyond that and identifying families, there's not enough information to be able to do that.
Thank you.
Other questions, board members?
Yes, this is Board Member Don. I have a question. Aloha, aloha.
Aloha.
I want to ask, maybe Alan, you mentioned that other state parks are repatriation sites. And however, I'm trying to think about whether or not any of those state parks are as heavily visited as Nuku'anu Wayside, Wanapali Wayside. I guess my concern is that if something as obvious as what was shown in the proposals is put up, that it will require someone to watch out, make sure that they're treated respectfully, etc. So can you address that concern of mine, please?
That is a good question. And there are the repatriations, reinterments do have come in many forms in state parks. They're often very inconspicuous, known only to those who participated in the reinterment and in confidential documents. This one, I think, as presented to us, there's almost a compelling reason to show respect and actually have a monument at this site. As Holly said, to honor and heal. But I think at this moment in history, I think we're on the right side of history in terms of teaching people about these things and these wrongs that were done in the past for whatever reason, as a way of actually promoting respect. And it is our belief that it will be respected. There are no guarantees, of course, but we're honoring the wishes of this request. And I think when you think of this, or like we got the toppling of Confederate monuments at this moment when we're doing something like this, and also proposing to put a statue of King Kaumo'oli'i at Pa'ulaula on Kauai. I think we're sort of on the right side of history here. And I think it's important that these things should be, they don't have to be hidden. These are important stories that I think can promote respect in the long run. So I'm not sure if I totally answered your question, but
if I may as well. So the design of the Ribeiro site is intended to do just that, to make sure there'll be a subsurface vault, so no one will be able to physically get at the remains, and then there'll be stanchions in the shape of ihe with an aha surrounding the site to indicate that people should stay away from the Ribeiro platform as well. And then, the proposal included signage to educate people on what this is. And in terms of education, that's the best we can do. But in terms of physical protection, they cannot be disturbed.
Mahalo for that. I wanted to, I just think about, for example, placing yourself above an alibi's, and so if anyone were to ignore the stanchions, go under or over the thing, and then be on the platform and take pictures and do stuff like that, that's maybe my concern. Is behaviors that might not really get physically at the EB, but would nonetheless be disrespectful to them.
And that's what the puli are for. That's why you puli protection into these sites, so that that's the kupuna's part. Somebody wants to do that, then they're taking a risk.
Yeah, mahalo for that.
Sam, typically at our heiau sites throughout the state of Hawaii, the primary thing that happens is uninformed visitors put rock laulau as an offering of some kind, thinking, by wrapping a rock in a leaf that they're participating in some way. So that's our anticipation, that I think it'll get respect, but there'll be misguided interpretation of the actual function of the reinternment site. So, and that'll be subject to just periodic maintenance and cleaning and, making sure they're respected so it doesn't proliferate. Yeah.
I think we will be watchful when this comes up, when the memorial is put into place. I think it would be good to be watchful and make sure that people are respectful and aware.
Hey, Sam, your voice is coming in and out.
Yeah, Sam, you want to speak more closely to the mic. You are going back and forth.
Yeah, I apologize for that.
Okay.
I was just saying that there'll be a need to be watchful in the first months of this, at least, to see what the public reaction is.
Agreed.
Other questions, comments, board members? I just want to say thank you for making this happen. You know, I went through the submittal. I talked to staff about it. I did not realize they were all women, and I didn't realize the reason for putting them up at the top was healing. I mean, not only the story of the collection, but the original story of the battle, and it is quite moving. So thank you so much. For that.
Thank you.
I just have a question, a couple of questions for Mr. Hayao, and it certainly does sound like a great project, and I appreciate the concept of placing them at the top for healing purposes. My question is really, I didn't quite get whether these skulls were just laying on the surface or had been buried and were basically dug up and grave robbed by whoever the collector was. And I'm asking this question to try to deepen my own understanding of what Hawaiian practices were toward EV, you know, certainly in the period of the 1790s and afterwards.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the collector and his record didn't indicate that they were buried. There's also the practice called moipu'u, where when chiefs pass away, the people who loved them so well would offer their own lives to escort them and serve them in the afterlife, where they would cause themselves to be buried with them. So it is unclear at this site whether, because none of these skulls were damaged. So you would think if someone had fallen from that distance, there would be damage, but there wasn't. So to answer your question, the collector's notes didn't indicate that they were buried, which to me says that they were exposed, and therefore consistent with the narrative that they were part of the battle and what took place at the top. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it just seemed, well, I don't know you're the expert on Hawaiian burials. Does that seem unusual to you that these bones would have simply been left on the surface for many decades?
Absolutely. This was a battle context. So this was Kamehameha's takeover of Oahu Island. You know, after they captured Kalani Kupule, you know, if you go to the Bishop Museum, you can visit Kalani Kupule. His iwi are in the standard of a kahili, because that's what his fate was. So, you know, because this was a battle context, leaving bodies exposed like that was the norm. And it was a message to people that who won the battle, and leaving them kola'i or exposed was the practice. So that's why, you know, given that kind of tradition, more so we wanted to have them placed on top as a means to heal.
So leaving them out was a kind of disrespect for
intentional, yes,
intentional disrespect
by the victors.
You know, an archaeologist once told me that a majority of the fish hooks found in archaeological sites in Hawaii are made from human bone, and that it was a resource. And so that also makes me so surprised that, like, that's, and I don't know if they use skulls. She mentioned, the person I talked to, tibia, as being a source of fish hooks. Is that wrong, you think, or is that what she's telling me? And it just, if they were used as a resource, because they were very hard, you know, human bone is a very hard material, that there must also have been some kapu or something that kept people from taking the iwi as a resource from this site.
Right. So to your first question, I cannot speak to whether a majority of human bone fish hooks are human bone. The majority of them are mammal, for sure, because not just human bone was used, pig bone was used, dog bone was used. So number one. And number two, the practice of human bone fish hooks was normally done by a family who say their kupuna was a very accomplished fisherman. It wasn't just a bone that they were trying to appropriate, it was his mana, was his ability to fish. And so when that was done within the family, not as a sign of disrespect, but actually as a sign of respect, because now that kupuna has the role of continuing to feed his or her family after he passes away. The other practice, of course, is to misappropriate remains where they were taken. So if a family had a fisherman in their family who was well known, they would go to great lengths to hide him from the other families who would want to appropriate his bone for that very reason. But the point is, it's not just the material, the physical that they were concerned with. It was just as much the spiritual and the mana of that person. If they were a really good fisherman, it was because they had the mana to do so. And that was what was coveted.
Well, you've taught me a lot. And the last question I have is, were these actually taken from the site in 1866, or were they taken from the site earlier and given to the museum in 1866?
They were taken from the site in 1866.
Okay.
And then shipped off to England. So, legally speaking, they had no permission from the kingdom to export. They had no permission from England to import them. And to its credit, Cambridge University's University Council recognized that, not just the ethics of this, but the legality of this, and made the right determination in our view. I even flew up on November 25th last year. So I was present at Cambridge when they made their decision, just in case they got it wrong.
Well, thank you very much. As I say, you've taught me a lot in answering this.
Thank you so much.
If I may interject a little bit, Chris, to your question about the bodies being left exposed. If I recall correctly, and I'm sure Halealoha knows this as well, when they were doing improvements in the conversion of the trail, the traditional trail, into the first road and the like, or even indeed, if I remember correctly, when they were working on the tunnels, their workmen came across human remains that were largely near the surface or in the talus of the cliffs. So they had been waiting there for a long time.
Correct. And I mean, that's absolutely correct. So, the request also ties in the work that was done, as you pointed out, to build the old Pali Road, because there's news reports of the dynamiting that was done, and reference to they found an estimated 800 sets of remains at the base of the Pali. So that occurs in around the 1870s, 80s. So the collection here occurred just before that, just before they were covered by the rubble that was caused from the dynamiting. So yeah, it was these iwi went through a very rough treatment.
Okay, thank you. Somebody want to make a motion to approve E1 as submitted?
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Unanimous.
Thank you, everyone, for your great work on this.
Thank you for your great work. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alan.
Mahalo.
Aloha.
Okay, we're going to move to E2. Let me just do a couple more people coming in here. Okay, we have somebody signed up who I don't see in the waiting room. So it's Ellen Foley Gannon. And so If you're there, it's because your computer is named something else. So if you could just rename it or send us a message. But let's go ahead with E2.
Okay, thank you, Chair and board members. I'm looking for Dave Smith because I'd agreed with DOFA. Again, this isn't really our story to tell. We're just hosting.
Yeah, Dave is here. Dave is here.
Yeah. So I defer to Forest and Wildlife. We're in full support in utilizing some of our state park land along the Kalalau Rim for this mitigation project. So with that, I defer to Forestry and Wildlife to go into the submittal.
Hey, Kirk, before we jump in,
yeah,
that background picture that you have, where is that located?
Oh, thank you for noticing. Lapakahi.
Where's that?
Big Island, west
Big
side.
Island?
Yeah.
Kona side?
What's that? Yeah. Up more north.
Kohala Coast.
Kohala, yeah. It was an image taken by our drone operator, who was also an archaeologist, and so we were doing aerial mapping of the sites at Lapakahi, and it's just one of those striking images that really shows.
Beautiful.
Yeah, the quality of the water and the detail of the
yes
archaeology.
Wow, awesome.
Okay, Dave Smith. Where'd he go?
Yep.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, so this is a request to establish a plant protection site and seabird mitigation site in Kokay State Park, authorizing the chair to approve and execute a memorandum of agreement between the Division of Forestry and Wildlife and the Department of Transportation for installation and maintenance of the site. So this is up at Kahua Flats, and it's a follow-on for the approval by the board in June of the Kauai Seabird Habitat Conservation Plan, and part of that plan was to establish a seabird mitigation site up in this area. We had identified another site, and we're getting ready to build a predator-proof fence there, but it was a very steep site, and when they went up to do some of the final scoping, they found that a majority of the site, there had been a landslide on the site, had wiped out most of the value for seabird nesting in that area. So we had to look for another area, and this is a more moderate sloped area that we're looking to utilize. It also incorporates a rare plant fence that has been existing in the area since I believe the 90s. And so we're just looking at setting up an area that all of the light attraction applicants and the Kauai Seabird Habitat Conservation Plan, the HCP, can utilize to mitigate for the take associated with various light attraction issues on Kauai, being seabird, being street lights or commercial properties, hotels, the harbors, and the Norwegian Cruise Line ships and whatnot. So there's a whole consortium of applicants, and DOT has agreed to take the lead on behalf of the applicants so that we can have an agency-to-agency relationship in terms of moving into an MOA to manage this area.
Okay, questions, board members? Or I see Chris Takeno. Do you want to add anything?
Nothing right now.
Okay. Okay, you're DOT, right? Yeah.
Correct.
Okay, any questions, board members? If not, somebody want to move to approve E2 as submitted?
Move to approve E2. Second, E2 as submitted.
Okay, all in
Second.
favor? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, any abstain? Okay, that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Let's
Thank
take
you.
a 5-minute break, and then we'll move to the F agenda items.
Mahalo. Have a good weekend, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna get started again. All right, we have everyone, and so we're gonna go on to F1.
Okay, still waiting for David Gilco. Oh, there he's just joined. Good morning, Chair and board members. Brian Nielsen, Administrator, Division of Aquatic Resources. Also joined by our aquatic biologist, David Gilco. Item F1, request for approval to outplant a small number of coral colony modules grown at Anui Nui Fisheries Research Center to determine viability of restoring damaged and deceased coral assemblages at Hanauma Bay Marine Life Conservation District, Honolulu, Hawaii. We also wanted to orally add a first recommendation to our submittal to accept the declaration of exemption, and that was emailed out to board members this morning. But with that, I'll hand it over to David Gilco.
Aloha, board members. Thank you for allowing us the time. I know at a previous board meeting, we had tried to share a presentation about what we're doing with you and it didn't work. I've incorporated part of that into our presentation on Hanauma Bay. And so if you just give me a second for me to get it up on the share screen. And is everybody able to
Yeah,
see?
it's working. It's working. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So we want to present to you this idea of coral restoration. And if you haven't had people talking to you about coral restoration yet, I think you're going to be deluged with it in the near future because it's becoming a very big thing around the world. And it's really important to note that in Hawaii, like many aspects of our natural environment, our coral reefs are extremely different than those found everywhere else in the world. And that causes us to approach the management of them slightly differently than what is seen in other jurisdictions. What I'm showing you here is the dominant form of coral restoration that's done everywhere in the world except for Hawaii. It basically involves breaking small pieces off of larger colonies and growing them in in-water nurseries, that is nurseries that are in the ocean. And these can take various forms as shown here. They can be trees like in the upper left, it can be tables, they can be hung on lines underwater, they can be attached to various structures. This does not work in Hawaii, and it's really important that you understand why. So there's a couple major reasons why we have to do things differently. The first is that roughly 25% of our coral species are endemic in Hawaii, meaning they're found nowhere else in the world. And it's important to understand this because we have no replacement pool. For example, if you go to the Australian Great Barrier Reef, we could destroy a big chunk of the barrier reef, and then you just go next door to Papua New Guinea, the Solomon Islands, Indonesia, and you could get exactly the same species to repopulate the damaged area. But here in Hawaii, we don't have that luxury because so many of our coral species are found nowhere else than Hawaii. Some of them are limited to single islands, and we have a couple species that are limited to single embayment. So we have to be a lot more careful with our management decisions because of that. The second issue, and this is the most important take-home message, is that on average across all 60 species of corals in the main Hawaiian Islands, the growth rate is about 1 to 2 centimeters per year. Now compare that with Florida, where the average growth rate is about 15 centimeters a year, or Australia, where the average growth rate is 20 to 25 centimeters a year. And that means it takes a very, very, very long time for our corals to recover from a disturbance. And it also means that a lot of the strategies that are used elsewhere to restore or grow corals won't work here because they grow so slow. And then the third aspect, which outside of Oahu, it may seem kind of abstract, but it is true on most of our major islands, is that we are relatively urbanized, meaning that a lot of the concentration of people and activities in our islands are right along our coastlines. And because of the unique geographical layout of the islands, our reefs are also right against the coastline. So a lot of the impacts that are occurring on our reefs are locally caused. And that's different than a lot of other areas where in Australia, your reefs may be impacted by human activities far away from Australia because of the way the currents grow. Our unique location means a lot of our impacts are centrally located. So this is the first take-home message, is that because of our high endemism, our slow growth rate, those two aspects drive a lot of our unique coral management issues. A second misperception, or a second issue, and this is kind of new, is that traditionally we've taken the approach that when researchers or educators or even people who want to do coral restoration come to us, the idea has been that if we provide a permit to take a coral, the corals will slowly grow back, or new larvae will settle out into those spaces, grow and replace that coral at that really slow growth rate, maybe 20, 25 years later. But what we found from some studies, including at the Port Royal site, which, I'm sorry, not Port Royal, Cape Flattery grounding site, is that we did not get recovery. We did not get the new recruitment. And in fact, as most places on the planet right now with corals, we're not seeing the amount of successful coral reproduction, larval development, and settlement that we thought we would see. And therefore, we have to rethink this idea of how we allow for take a coral. And in fact, we should be thinking along the lines of there needs to be replacement or mitigation done for large amounts of coral that are taken for projects, including restoration projects, because you need to source those corals. So let's talk again about restoration specifically. This is the dominant form done everywhere. It involves the need for fast growing, usually branching species that are maintained in relatively calm water. Those are two things we don't have a lot of in Hawaii. We don't have the dominant branching coral species seen everywhere else in the world, which is called Acropora. And we have very little really calm water where we have a lot of reefs outside of Kaneohe Bay. And the process of this produces lots of little corals that people go and outplant. And because of those fast growth rates, they expect it to recover their reefs. So here's an example to quickly show you what I mean. This is Fiji. It's supposed to represent Fiji. And this is a generic branching coral. And what people do is they take this source coral and they break off the branch tips to get a whole bunch of little branch tips. And over a couple years, those grow into new colonies in their nursery. And that's what they present to the regulating board, is that, look what we're getting. We're getting all these new colonies out of this original source colony. But you also have to look back at the source colony itself and look at what happens to it. And in Fiji, what happens is, because you've broken off a bunch of branch tips, it's smaller, but over that 2-year period, it grows back to its original size. So the net result is you had a 2-year loss in ecological services and functions, but you gained back your source colony after 2 years, plus a whole bunch of little colonies that you can now use for restoration. Now let's do the same thing here in Hawaii. If we took a same generic branching coral and we broke off a bunch of little branch tips, just like we did in Fiji, same size, etc., the difference is, because of that really slow growth rate here, those little pieces, which are under more severe stress because of their size, are exposed over a longer period to stressors than they would have been in Fiji. And the result is far few of them survive. And what does survive is a lot smaller because it's growing at that 1 to 2 centimeter growth rate. Additionally, if we look back at the source coral itself and we break off those branch tips, we have that smaller source coral now that needs to regrow. And after 2 years, it hasn't grown back much because it's only growing at 1 to 2 centimeters per year, which is the natural rate here. So the net result in Hawaii of taking this technique that's used everywhere else in the world is actually a loss of ecological services and functions because of that slow growth rate. We actually get less out of the restoration technique than we would elsewhere. And this is important because it means that allowing for that extraction of coral for this activity could actually cause a net loss. And therefore, some sort of mitigation or compensation needs to be provided for the take of that coral. And it's under this situation that we were faced in Hawaii with trying to deal with how we were going to restore our natural coral reefs. Now, one other thing I need to point out to you is, to restore a coral reef, you have to have a source of coral. And where would our sources of corals come from in Hawaii? Here's the Hawaiian Islands. And from this photo, what you need to understand is most of our well-developed reefs, it's not like Florida where you can go out 12 miles offshore and find nice coral. In Hawaii, most of our coral is jammed right next to the shoreline because the water gets really deep close to shore. And most of our well-developed reefs, with the exception of Kaneohe Bay, are on the leeward sides of the island, which is where most of our development occurs. most of our urbanization occurs, and most of our impacts entering that nearshore waters, which is where most of our coral is, occurs. So what have we done at DAR? We developed a new technique. We call it the fast grow technique, and it takes advantage of something that these guys in their garages in the Midwest have been doing for decades, which is microfragging corals in order to share them. And what we do is we start off with 10 centimeters of source coral from a coral. In our case, we start off with harbor corals because they were easy to get and they pose very little impact to our natural reefs from taking them. We microfrag it, meaning we break it down into tiny little pieces, put it onto a module, and it grows back together. And in a year, actually less than a year, we go from 10 centimeters of source to a 42 centimeter coral colony module, which in the wild would take 20 to 25 years to grow naturally. Now, getting to that mitigation issue that I just brought up, in order to restore those functions from natural reefs, if we were to source the corals from natural reefs, we would, instead of taking 10 centimeters, we would take 20 centimeters, break it into two 10 centimeter subsets, end up growing two modules. One would go to our restoration area. The second one would go back to the source reef, so that what we end up with at the end of the year is we've lost the ecological services and functions of 20 centimeters of coral for 1 year, but we've replaced it a year later with a 42 centimeter coral of the same genetic material, the same colony, species, and shape and form, but just a lot bigger. And in the wild, to go from 20 centimeters to 40 centimeters would take about a decade. So we've gained 9 years of ecological services and functions by taking this approach. One of the things we needed to develop into this, because of some of the unique issues here in Hawaii, such as invasive species, et cetera, is very strict quarantine procedures, which have added a month to sometimes more than a month onto our whole process. But we think that this is necessary in order to ensure that we're not introducing anything that shouldn't be there when we outplant these corals. So we've taken this approach of source corals and how we're dealing with it. What have we done with it? Well, about 10 years ago, this is the Inui Nui Fisheries Research Center out on Sand Island. We took an unused area of the research center and we slowly started to develop our restoration nursery. It took 3 to 4 years for it to get built out. And I'm just going to show you a small part of it. These are 2 of our grow out rooms at the nursery. And what you see in the upper photo in the center, this is one of our coral saws that we use for making those microfragments. You can see our modules with the microfragments on it. And you can see to the left, you can see a fully grown module, fully covered over. This is the process of microfragmentation. And what you can see here, oh, I'm sorry, one click behind, I apologize. Is it frozen? Are you guys seeing?
Yeah, we're on the microfragmentation slide.
Okay. So what we do is we cut these into very small pieces. There are some disadvantages to microfragmentation. One of the problems with it is that you are severely stressing the coral. So if there is going to be a problem, it's going to affect them at these really small sizes. So that requires us to place them into very specialized tanks. And what we do is we attach the microfrags to these modules, which have been specially cured using surgical super glue. We then place them into these specialized tanks that we have at the facility. These are like 5-star hotels. They're getting room service, they're getting maid service. The water is maintained exceptionally clean. They're getting fed 3 times a week. We have specialized lights that allow them to grow at really fast rates. And over a period of 6 to 8 months, they grow until they form into these fully formed colonies that you can see here. I'm just checking to make sure that it hasn't frozen, because on my screen it looks frozen.
I think it's good.
Okay, so once those are fully grown over, we then have to, we can't put them immediately out in the open. We have to actually place them into acclimation tanks where we can make the water a little cruddier. It's kind of like going from a 5-star hotel to being homeless in Kalihi. So what we do instead is we put them in these specialized tanks. We can recreate water conditions, turbidity, depth, et cetera, to simulate the outplant conditions. And once they've been in these tanks for over a month and they're ready to go out, we then carefully take them out to the ocean, carefully transport them to the outplant site, glue them onto the bottom using a special 2-part cement that's been shown to have very little measurable impact on the corals. and then monitor them over time. And here you can see a variety of modules that we've outplanted and compare it to natural corals at the site. And remember, once they go out of these tanks, we're back to that 1 to 2 centimeter natural rate. And here you can see after 2 years at the site, it's taken on a natural form that's very similar to what you would expect a coral to look like, except look at the color, look at the robustness of it. This is an extremely healthy coral. And in fact, one of the things that sets us apart is we may be the most expensive coral nursery right now on the planet, but we also have the highest survival rate of corals of any nursery grown corals that have been measured. Here's one after 2.5 years, once again showing you how robust and healthy it is. And here you can see a variety of our modules out. And I want you to note that there is some natural accretion. It's extremely slow because they're now back to growing at 1.2 centimeters per year. But compared to the natural coral around it, it's looking really, really healthy. We've used this, and to really get this point down, this is one of our modules. This is rice coral, a fully grown 42 centimeter module at the nursery. And we measured this summer, look at the little things inside the circle, that's sexual reproduction. So for a coral to do that, it has to be extremely healthy. It also has to be fully acclimated to natural conditions, so it's responding to moon phase. And as far as I know, this is the first example of a nursery grown microfrag coral spawning in captivity, or spawning, showing that it's following through under natural behaviors, which attest to the positive results of what we're doing. Those were 42 centimeter colonies. Those are pretty good. At the time we did it, it was the largest in the world, but we wanted to go bigger. We wanted to go up to 1 meter. And to do 1 meter, we had to change our concept a little bit. We ended up creating 4 modules, each with genetically identical materials. We would put them together underwater in the field so that all they would have to do is fuse along these yellow lines here. That would take only about a week, and we'd have a full 1 meter coral. Now, 1 meter coral in Hawaii would take 100 to 125 years to grow. We were targeting doing it in 1 year. Well, that was the plan. Here's the reality. We started off doing this. You can see it's now fully grown in the nursery in the growing tanks. Here's a close-up showing you how that the microfrags fuse. Here it is fully covered in our acclimation tank. And here's the world's first 1 meter coral outplanted off the reef runway. Once again, representing the 100 to 125 years of ecological services and functions that was produced in under a year. That's big, wide 1 meter corals. How about big, tall corals? Something like these big branching Poeciloporeae duai. Well, in a tank, that's really hard to grow. So we came up with a new way to do it. Now, to explain this, I'm gonna have to take a little side shot. If any of you have dogs and you ever take it to the vet, you know how sometimes they put this cone of shame around their head to keep them from licking themselves? Well, we came up with a cone of shame for a coral where we combined the sick dog collar with a mylar balloon and basically produced a structure that we could put the coral in where the mylar would reflect the light to the sides of the tall structure, allowing the coral to grow equally along its length. And here it is after we've produced it. And here it is in our acclimation tanks being acclimated so we can put it on the reef. This is the world's first tall nursery grown coral being ready to be put out. The third types of projects that we do at the Coral Nursery is most places in the world, corals only reproduce once a year. But in Hawaii, we're really lucky. We have a couple species that produce larvae either weekly or daily. And we've been able to take advantage of that and collect the larvae on a daily basis from certain colonies. These larvae are genetically identical and they function much like our genetically identical microfragments in that if we can coalesce them in a area where they settled, the larvae will all settle in one spot. As they start to grow, because they're genetically identical, they'll fuse with each other and we'll get a big colony in a fraction of the time it would take normally or naturally here in Hawaii. So with these wide variety of strategies that we've developed here in Hawaii and we've been very successful at and that we've applied these biosecurity techniques to, we've been able to come up with ways to counteract the fact that our corals grow so slow and the unique concerns we have here related to endemism and other factors. But a lot of this depends upon the professionalism and the experience of the people who are growing the corals. And we recognize we probably have some of the best people in the world working here, but we need more if we're going to expand this and do more in Hawaii. And we know there's a lot of people who want to try and do restoration in Hawaii. So the division has put out an implementation guide that's full of protocols, but also full of ways to minimize impact and to mitigate impacts relating to a wide variety of the different aspects of growing coral, either in land-based or water-based nurseries. Okay, so let's do a quick overview. In Hawaii, if you look at this picture of a reef, our reefs are impacted by a wide variety of impacts. Some of those are locally caused by for example, the smallest yellow circles. But nowadays, we're also seeing regional impacts and global impacts, and that's the same thing that reefs all over the world are facing. Traditionally, what DAR has done is we tend to regulate or to manage our reefs by regulations, by MPAs, and by education of the public. That's not working that well in today's world, and we need new ways of doing it in addition to our traditional responses. So what the division developed was a set of direct line of defense. We came up with a tool where we could measure ecological services, so we could balance what we're proposing for mitigation or restoration against the impact. We came up with a mitigation bank so we could trade the mitigation against the impacts. And we developed our coral restoration nursery where we have the tools for conducting that restoration. And then also importantly, along with that is our AIS, our aquatic invasive species response team, which basically allows us to address some of the primary impacts that were affecting restoration in Hawaii. That does pretty well for the local impacts. It doesn't do so well for the global and regional impacts. For those, we need a secondary line of defense. And by the way, a lot of places in the world are looking in the same direction. How do we affect things at the level of about 1 square kilometer for an island? In other words, how do we modify habitats? And one of the unique issues here in Hawaii, because of our endemism, is our unique species. And what we've developed is a coral arc. And this is the coral arc at the nursery. We have a total of 60 Hawaiian coral species we maintain at our facility, but about 48 of them are rare or uncommon, and we maintain them in a coral arc as our insurance policy. But it's worked so well, we've actually been able to grow some of them as microfrags, especially the one on the left that disappeared from Kaneohe Bay with the last bleaching event. We produce small modules, such as the one shown in the forefront. And last summer, we outplanted them onto the reef successfully to reintroduce this coral that was extirpated from Kaneohe Bay back into the bay. Now, after all that and talking about our successes, what are we proposing today for Hanauma Bay?
Hey,
Hanauma
David,
Bay
you're
is,
one slide ahead. If you can go back one slide.
thank you.
There you go.
Okay, so one of the things that we are proposing, or actually the main thing we're proposing for Hanauma Bay today is to introduce 6 small polyporid colonies to areas where they already occur in the shallow portions of the bay where there's high human impact from visitors. We've surveyed the entire shallow area of the bay looking for sites that would be appropriate to do this. We found 2 where there was the same species growing at about the same sizes in areas where they're high in human impact. And these are the corals themselves. I'm sorry, am I way ahead, Brian?
You're on project 1 slide showing a picture.
I
of Hanauma Bay.
apologize. It's showing differently on
It's
my
not
screen.
synced, yeah.
So let me go back. I'm not sure it's going back. Anyway, we have 6 colonies. They're less than 25 centimeters each in size. They're made up of material from leeward Oahu that we've held at the nursery in high biosecurity conditions for over 4 years. They were skinned, which means we didn't use much of the skeleton itself. It was the live tissue that was carefully grown into these colony modules, and they're very small and they're easily taken out if there's any issues. And what we're hoping to do is use them to see the viability of conducting restoration at the bay, given its high human usage. That's what we're proposing for today, but we wanted to share with you really quick some ideas we had about future possible restoration of Hanauma Bay MLCD, because it is such a jewel and because the corals in many parts of the bay have become degraded due to a variety of resources. We've targeted different types of coral habitats for different types of projects. And really quickly, just going through them, what we're looking at is, I'm sorry, it's really hard to tell which one it's on here.
You're on the future DLNR Hanauma Bay slide. It shows
Thank
the
you.
whole bay.
Okay, so this next slide is the first project. This is to to take advantage of the results from this test outplanting that we're proposing to conduct, and target those areas in the shallow part of Hanauma Bay where there's the highest human usage, trampling, presumably sunscreen concentration, et cetera, and looking at putting in some small colonies only of species that occur there to increase the amount of small shelter habitat for fish that are associated with corals, and also to provide a live coral for people to see in those areas. Other parts of the bay, we're looking at other projects, but one of the critical things that we feel needs to be considered is changing how education is done at the bay, in part by providing people the ability to experience live coral prior to getting into the water, so they recognize how fragile it is to cut down on trampling and other issues. And one of the things, especially in this time of COVID, that we've been thinking about is perhaps working with the city and county to rethink parts of their visitor center to include perhaps representations such as that shown here with these walk around aquarium modules that we could put live coral in. These corals would not be from Hanauma Bay. They would be closed systems. We would grow them at the nursery, but it would allow for people to see live coral. And then in the tops of these enclosed tanks, we would have cameras that point downwards that they would be able to access with a phone app. What this allows for is spreading out of people's educational experience. Right now, it's concentrated in this very small visitor center where with COVID concerns, it's not going to work. But with a phone app, everybody's going to Hanauma Bay with their phones. They could see the corals, they could go in close. Later on, perhaps we could have some floating transmitters out in the bay so they could see perhaps the turtle cleaning station, fish cleaning stations, other areas of the bay. They could see a camera mounted at the top so they could see what parts of the beach are heavily used, et cetera. This would provide for education spread out and perhaps might be fundable under CARES Act funding. Third project that we're proposing or might be proposing in the future would be
On
creation.
project one slide is what's showing.
Sorry, that should, is it now 2?
Nope, still 1.
It's really slow getting through these.
Yep.
And Dave, I know we have some public testimony too, so
Okay.
I want to give
So-
people a chance to talk.
Really quick, if I'll just end it here by saying that we proposed 7 different projects, each dealing with different aspects of coral in different parts of the bay. The corals would either be sourced from inside the bay or directly outside to minimize genetic concerns and to deal with rare species issues, et cetera. They would be maintained under extremely high biosecurity, which we're famous for at the Coral Nursery, and would be monitored extensively both by DAR and also by groups such as Friends of Hanauma Bay. And with this, we're hoping for a long-term restoration commitment for our premier MLCD. And by showing success in this, perhaps even expanding it to other MLCDs or other sites in the state where such restoration would be useful and helpful. And with that, I'll thank you and take any questions if anybody has any.
So that was terrific. It's so fascinating. And I do encourage any board members who want a tour of the Coral Nursery at Anuenue on Sand Island. I'm certain that David would be very happy to show you around. Why don't we just go? I know we have a little bit of public testimony, so why don't we just do that and then we can take any questions. So Lisa Bishop. And you got to unmute yourself.
All right, thank you. Aloha, Chair Case and board members. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you very much. The Friends of Hanauma Bay, the Kohala Center, Ocean Defenders Alliance Hawaii, the Hawaii Reef and Ocean Coalition, Fairwind Cruises, For the Fishes, the Center for Biological Diversity Hawaii, the Hereticus Environmental Laboratory, and the Napili Bay and Beach Foundation strongly support this proposal. As you all know, the City and County of Honolulu's closure of the Hanauma Bay Nature Preserve in March of 2020 due to COVID-19 closed public access to the Hanauma Bay Marine Life Conservation District. After only 6 months of closure, The Hanauma Bay MLCD has seen a dramatic natural resurgence in water quality and marine life in the inner reef that has been unseen in decades. There is now an unprecedented opportunity for Hawaii to renew its dedication to Hanauma Bay more than 50 years after its designation as the state of Hawaii's first MLCD. The Division of Aquatic Resources Hawaii Coral Restoration Nursery is the acknowledged world leader in innovative and successful Hawaiian coral cultivation and outplanting. It is the only facility in the world to develop and implement a successful method to accelerate the growth of slow-growing Hawaiian corals, as Dr. Goko showed you earlier. The nursery has a 100% outplant success rate and is only one of 2 facilities in the state to successfully outplant corals without introducing invasive species or disease vectors to the outplant sites. The Hawaii Coral Restoration Nursery also created and maintains the largest collection of rare and endemic Hawaiian corals in the world in its Rare Hawaiian Coral Ark, kept in trust for Hawaii's current and future generations. Given its excellent track record, we have full confidence in the Hawaii Coral Restoration Nursery's ability to implement this small controlled outplanting at Hanauma Bay. This project would help DAR determine the viability of restoring various portions of Hanauma Bay where a variety of coral species have died or disappeared over the decades due to high human use, natural events, and most recently, a large piece of marine debris that entered the bay and destroyed numerous large coral colonies as it washed ashore. Approval of this project will build on Hanauma Bay's current resurgence and demonstrate whether additional coral restoration is viable in order to accelerate the return of lost ecological services and functions in this important reef site. Mahalo for your consideration of our testimony, and we would also like to thank Brian Nielsen and Dr. David Golko for this initiative that they have taken in initiating the first landmark coral restoration project at Hanauma Bay. We are thrilled that DAR is taking this on board and is willing to try this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, we have one other public testimony, Max Phillips, and then we'll go to any questions.
Aloha mai kako, Chair, board members. Mahalo for this opportunity to offer the Center for Biological Diversity's strong support for this agenda item. My name is Max Phillips. I am the Center for Biological Diversity's Hawaii Director and Staff Attorney. The presentation, a big mahalo to the entire crew at HCRN, to Dar, to Brian, and to the Friends of Hanauma Bay who are really spearheading bringing this project forward. It's so imperative for the health of this marine protected area, which, as we've seen from years of human use impacts, during this closure time, we're starting to see a resurgence of our native, threatened, and endangered species coming back into the bay. And any way that we can continue that momentum is imperative in these uncertain environmental times. I'll keep my testimony brief, but I just really want to highlight the success of HCRN. I mean, they have 100% survival rate of their coral in Santa Island, Kaneohe Bay, and at Reef Runway. So there's no reason to doubt their ability to have this type of success in Hanauma Bay. Their baseline surveys are properly conducted for Hanauma Bay based off of our internal scientific evaluations at the center. And the 2 proposed outplant sites make sense and are appropriate. And my final point is that it's this strong partnership between HCRN, DAR, and the community in this instance, with the monitoring of the survival rates and the growth of these corals that really is an exciting and encouraging part of the project. So I just humbly request that this board approve DAR's submittal to outplant these 6 small coral colonies and to continue to support HCRN in all of their efforts.
Thank you so much. Okay, board members, any questions on this?
I'm very
I have a few. Who's that?
Go ahead, Jim.
This is for Dr. Glucko. You know, we said that Florida and Australia has a fast-growing coral. And Hawaii has so unique corals that some places, no places in the world have it. But is there any kind of species that grow fast there and it's not invasive that we could possibly think and bring to Hawaii, or that wouldn't be recommended?
Thank you. It really wouldn't be recommended. And let me explain quickly why. Basically, fast-growing species in the plant world are oftentimes called weeds. And in Hawaii, we'd have the same concern. It's not just that our corals are unique. Keep in mind that these unique endemic corals have a wide variety of fish and invertebrates that have also evolved at the same time to live on, in, and around these unique corals. And so we would be putting at risk not just our unique coral species, but a wide variety of endemic fish, invertebrates, possibly some seaweeds, and the corals themselves. So our entire ecosystem would be modified if we were to bring in outside corals to try to grow over that. In addition, there are reasons why we don't see some of these species here. And it has to do with their larvae. It has to do with some of the unique conditions we have here. Our waters are cooler than most coral reefs in most other places. And the species that have done well here tend to be the slow growing corals, perhaps because of the way that they allocate energy slowly over time versus the fast growing corals, these fast growing branching corals. Just real quickly, it would be a very bad idea because it would put at risk not just the individual corals, but our entire ecosystems. There would be phase shifts, entire changes in the ecosystem, which could cascade all the way down. It could affect our food fisheries. It would certainly affect how wave energy is mitigated by the reef structures over time, and that would affect our coastal infrastructure.
So my next question, real quick, is because of what you just said, and I agree with you, this coral outplanting that you're doing, or reinforestation, have you seen now during this pandemic that we have you seen more reef fish in the areas that you've done the reinforestation to it?
We have not done any coral restoration in Hanauma Bay yet, and the places where we have done coral restoration are not, we picked them because they were places where the public does not heavily use, so that there was greater protection. We're now asking to try to do this in a place where there is high public use. In regards to changes during the time of COVID, there have been people such as the University of Hawaii, Hawaii Institute of Marine Biology, Dr. Kule Rogers has been looking at the differences specifically at Hanauma Bay, and I really don't want to speak for her, but I will. They have seen significant differences in how the fish are behaving and the concentrations of fish in the shallow water areas with the absence of people. I don't know of other places in the state. I could, or Brian, we could check with the DAR surveys that have been done elsewhere, because we are monitoring constantly other areas to see what effect we can say what.
I could speak to that a little bit. Yeah, so just to follow up what David said, in Hanauma Bay, you can see more fish because you can see further. Water clarity is increased, I believe, 80%. Is that right, Lisa? In Hanauma Bay, just because you don't have as many people in the bay stirring up the bottom, so water clarity is increased. But our DAR divers that have been doing surveys, throughout the state during the COVID, they're seeing a change in fish behavior. Fish, you can get closer to the fish, especially in areas that are popular with tour sites, just because there's not as many users around scaring fish. So I don't think we're seeing population increases just because it's been such a short amount of time, but there's definitely been changes in fish behavior. And this is also for, juvenile schooling fish as well, akule, and those type of fish are schooling in areas that would usually be, heavily used by visitors.
Thank you.
Hey, Dr. Gahn, you had a question.
No, I was just going to point out that it's been a little while since I visited the Anuenue coral projects. Last time I was there, I enjoyed it a lot, and even had a chance to participate in the activities that were.
Sam, you're going in and out again.
Sorry, okay, I'll go closer to my microphone. I really enjoyed the last time that I was at Anuenue and looked at the coral projects there. I'm sure they are much more sophisticated and better developed now. And it's time for me to go visit again, I bet.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions, board members?
Yes, so just a comment. I really appreciated getting all this information. Now, I just wonder that, and I hope this kind of thing continues, I would suggest maybe that the DAR next time, and when you feel comfortable doing this, bring basically a blanket approval to the board for continuing this, because it, you know, as much as we'd like to see you, it takes a lot of time, and I think at some point you'll feel comfortable enough, and I certainly trust you enough that we could give a sort of a blanket approval for DAR to do these coral outplantings.
Great. We can do that, and we did want to give DAR a chance to give us a little briefing on this project and also on the coral fishery. The coral nursery, because we had some technical difficulties last time.
And while I had the experts here, I had a couple of other questions. You know, one of the issues, of course, with coral is the coral bleaching. And I was listening to a science podcast that talked about zooxanthellae, and there are different types of, you know, the issue is that the coral expel the zooxanthellae. They were saying that there are different varieties of zooxanthellae, that there may be some that produce fewer toxic products and may not induce the coral to eject them in warmer water. And I'm wondering if there's any research going on in Hawaii. And I know, I think I've heard of research going on in like less vulnerable strains of coral, but I was wondering if there's any work going on in like zooxanthellae.
Yes, actually there is. And actually some of the longest term work on zooxanthellae has been here in Hawaii at the Hawaii Institute of Marine Biology by retired professor Dr. Kinsey, who's still maintaining one of the largest examples of a variety of zooxanthellae cultures in the world is maintained out at Coconut Island. We are in the process of getting in touch with Dr. Kinsey. I'm not interested in trying to use any non-Hawaiian zooxanthellae populations in any of our corals, and we're not really focused on creating, quote, super corals, but looking to see what clades of zooxanthellae are available that he's maintaining that might be used under different circumstances, extremely warm water, extremely cold water, extremely shallow water, extremely deep water, would provide us a little bit more flexibility where appropriate to harden some of our corals that are destined for outplanting in some of the more extreme environments. But we're at the beginning stages of that, and we have a history at DAR with our coral restoration projects of taking years to thoroughly test things and pilot them in non-sensitive areas before we even request permission to do it in a natural area. And I think it'd be the same with this.
And the last question I have is, I recently went diving in Keauhou and Halape in the Hawaii Volcanoes National Park in an area that sank about 11 feet in the 1975 earthquake. And there are areas there that are, you know, maybe 2 feet deep at low tide with a tremendous coral cover. And I'm pretty sure that they were largely covered even 15 years ago when I was there. And it's just really remarkable that in ideal conditions, an area can become covered with coral rather quickly. I don't know if you're familiar with that, with the area that I'm talking about.
Yes, I am. And there's actually a very famous paper that was done back in the 90s or the 80s by Rick Grigg and Jim Maragos talking about colonization on lava flows. And they age different lava flows on the Big Island to show different stages of reef formation because they knew the age of the lava flow and they can show how quickly things come in. And once again, it's very similar to land-based systems where when you get a completely new substrate, hard substrate, like a flow, or in this case, the sinking of the land, it opens, it's like a brand new field for things to quickly settle into and suddenly spurt up, and you get these successional species that come in, you get the colonizing species, and then the successional species replace them. So I don't find it unusual that you do see large amounts of coral in those areas. The colonies are probably not the big, tall, robust, but they're covering a lot of the available substrate. And also keep in mind that that area, the Big Island, has very little land inputs from human impact perspective. You don't have lots of septic systems, you don't have lots of runoff, et cetera. So under those conditions, we would expect the corals in those areas to do much better.
Yeah, and there's spots where this happens where there's very good flow of water, but it's protected from the normal crash of waves that you get on the cliffside coast. Anyway, it was remarkable, but I appreciate what you're saying, that this may not be, the fact that they can establish themselves very quickly on new lava or freshly submerged lava may not translate to us being able to restore coral after a hurricane event, for example, rips up a coral bed. That may not be a comparable situation at all.
Okay, thank you very much. Any further questions? If not,
Chair, just have one
yeah,
question.
go.
Sorry, one
Yeah.
question. Dr. Golko, thank you for that. That was fascinating. My question is more on scale and timing. In a perfect, hypothetically, if you had a perfect, whatever that is to you, the regrowth rate of that coral seems pretty slow. So what are we talking about in the next 20 years, 50 years, 100 years? I'm going to guess mathematically, you're not talking about a full restoration of our reefs, right? Or are you? And what kind of percent do you think is achievable?
Actually, we are. Okay, and here's why. So when we first started the nursery, we were able to, with maximum production, put out about 80 42 centimeter modules a year. We recently expanded. We're up to about 220 42 centimeter modules a year. In the near future, DAR is hoping to reacquire a property directly adjacent to us that already has an existing building on it. And if we can get funding, we expect to go from being able to produce hundreds of modules a year to thousands of modules a year. And not just 42s, but we've already been successful at 1 meter, and now we're starting to think even larger corals, because in Hawaii, we have coral colonies that are thousands of years old that are 3-4 meters in diameter. And so working at these scales, it is possible. We've shown it's possible. It's just scaling it up to a production level where we can accomplish it. And to be reasonable, and just to give an example, the Australians right now are trying to restore the barrier reef. And they're working at scales, restoration scales of hundreds of square kilometers. But for an island system like Hawaii, an archipelago with islands, our workable scale that we should be trying to shoot for is about 1 square kilometer. And that involves putting out about 2,000 modules a year over about a 5-year period. So to answer your question, yes, it is possible. It's limited by resources, but we're working our way up and we're showing success at the scales we're working at. So it is reasonable to expect that as we expand and scale up further, that success will continue.
Thank you, Doctor. You just made my Friday.
Well, it's really exciting to be in on this very important first step and a wonderful opportunity to monitor very closely the success of this, or at least the progress of this project. So if there isn't any more questioning, I'm happy to make a motion to approve staff recommendation.
Thank you. And Dr. Gon, could I just confirm that what you are doing, I just want to make the wording right, that we are, the staff recommendation has been amended to add a first paragraph to say declare that after considering the potential effects of the proposed project, this project will probably have minimal or no significant effect on the environment and is therefore exempt from the preparation of an environmental assessment. And we will attach the environmental exemption form you've received. So that would be an amendment.
That was precisely what I wanted to say, Chair. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Second.
Thank you. All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstain? That passes. Thank you very, very much, everyone from
Mahalo,
Aquatic
everyone.
Resources and Hanauma Bay and CBD and great work.
Yeah, this is what we're on the land board for.
Exactly. Okay, we're going to move to our last section, which is Department of Transportation. The M items. Hang on one second. And so we have Mr. Oshiro for items M1 through 6. And just to save time, I think I will ask if there are any questions about M1 through 6 from board members. And first I should say, Mr. Oshiro, anything you want to add or change? Except you have to unmute. Right, you're still muted. There you go. All right, you're good.
Perfect. Okay, great. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Anything to add or change?
No, pretty straightforward on these submittals.
Okay, any questions, board members, M1 through 6? Okay, hearing none, is there a motion to approve M1 through 6 as submitted?
Move to approve M1 to 6 as submitted.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed, any abstain? That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Enjoy your
All right,
lunch.
thank you very much.
M7, I don't think we have a representative from DOT here, highways for that. Anybody have any questions on M7?
Move to defer. No, just fooling.
We did that last time. Okay, are you moving, do you want to move to approve?
I will so move to approve.
Second.
Okay, all right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, any abstained? That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. That brings us to the end of our agenda and our public meeting. Board members, please hang on. We're going to go into the break room briefly. And thank you to the members of the public for